Hello, good morning again, everybody. Wow, welcome back. I thought we had a full room yesterday, but today it's really packed. And that's good news, because we're gonna have a full show full of discussions with party leaders, prime ministers, commissioners, and last but not least, also an important speech. Because we want to thank today again our hosts, SPD, and in particular the German Chancellor, now since he's here with us, Olaf Scholz.
Liebe Genossinnen und Genossen, compañeras y compañeros, compagne e compagni, amici, comrades, friends. This is the second day of our Congress. Yesterday, it was an important moment for our organizations. We elected a new leadership. We elected a new president, Stefan Löfven. And the very first thing that Stefan did was to call for a presidency meeting and make a proposal for his team that will accompany him in leading the Party of European Socialists until the next Congress. So allow me to welcome and show to you this inclusive, representative, powerful team that will lead our movement in the near future. And I will begin by inviting on stage Irache Garcia Perez, our first Vice President.
And then I would like to welcome on stage our Treasurer, Caroline Genet.
And this will be followed by our Executive Vice President, Caterina Barley. Caroline.
And we have a second Executive Vice President, Francisco André.
And our Vice President from Slovenia, Tanja Fajon.
And Vice President Victor Negrescu.
And Kati Piri from the Netherlands, PvdA.
And Andrei Shenya.
And Radmila Shekerinska from North Macedonia. And after the Vice Presidents, we go to our Secretary General, Achim Post.
And then I would like to welcome our Executive Secretary General, Giacomo Filibeck.
And our Deputy Secretary General, Saar van Buren.
And last but not least, our other Deputy Secretary General, Jonnek Pollet.
And as we said, on top of everything is the President, Stefan Löfven. Get close. So this is the real photo op of the day. Alles good? Okay. Thomas Vaupel is giving us the sign of keep going. Keep going. You know, maybe you don't know, but Thomas Vaupel is the real mastermind of everything here.
Yeah.
Yes, an applause to Thomas Vaupel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stefan. You can stay. Yes. You call him in?
So, to kick off our program, we start with a speech, of course, of the new president of the Party of European Socialists and Democrats, Stefan Löfven.
Thank you so much, and dear leaders, dear prime ministers, delegates, friends. Once again, thank you so much for the trust that you have placed in me. It's an honor to be elected PES president also 30 years after we were founded. And to be that in Berlin, in Germany, also under the hosting of a German social democratic chancellor is something special. Friends, I believe that in times of crisis, it becomes even more obvious for more people that the answer to our great political challenges is the social democratic ideas of equality, solidarity, and community. No one is strong on their own. We social democrats, we know that, and we've known that for a long time. But I think it has become obvious for more people also today to realize that we as human beings, we need one another. That equality and solidarity are not only fine principles, they are actually the prerequisite for free and strong individuals who can create strong societies. Just look at the OECD and the International Monetary Fund. In the past, these organizations were the main defenders of neoliberalism. Now, they also understand that equality and growth are not in opposition to each other. On the contrary, equality and growth are each other's prerequisites. At the same time, populists and right-wing extremism are growing in Europe, which pits group against group. They add to anxiety and to division. They want to dismantle democracy. They threaten human dignity. It's so easy, always easier, to play on fear. That and to provide simple answers to difficult questions is the only game for populists and extremists. They deny the climate crisis we're in, they blame everything on immigration, and they say that democracy has reached its time. So friends, it is a frightening development we see in the world around us. And the history of Europe teaches us with brutal clarity what happens when democracy and human dignity are curtailed. The labor movement has always been right-wing extremists' main adversary. So are we now. We see what is happening in countries such as Hungary and Poland. Democracy and the rule of law are gradually being dismantled. Gradually, women's rights are restricted. Gradually, the equal value of all people is threatened. We see what is happening in Italy and unfortunately also in my home country, Sweden. Parties with roots straight down in the fascist and neo-Nazi past have now reached the ultimate political power. And therefore, my message is, defending democracy and human dignity will be one of our main tasks as social democrats in these coming years. We have, and we will always be clear, it is thanks to our political family that the EU today is committed to defend the rule of law and democracy. And there must be clear consequences for those countries, member states, that violate these European values. And we must never be naive. Far too often conservatives neither want to or are able to take on these right-wing extremists. So once again, it is us Social Democrats, together with genuinely liberal forces and Green parties, on whom this responsibility falls. Democracy must not be abolished from within. Trumpism must never be allowed to gain a foothold in our Europe. And it's also a matter of gender equality. As the right-wing conservatives gain power, women's rights, conditions, participation deteriorate. The fight for women's rights is a fight for human rights, but also our fight as men for a gender-equal society. So equality must always be on the top of our political agenda. And I praise PES women and their role in ensuring that we do have an EU gender equality strategy. Now, ratification of the Istanbul Convention is a must. Right to abortion must be part of the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. And gender-based violence must be eradicated. And as a feminist, it is obvious to me that equality, gender equality, is both an ideological and moral issue, but it's also a question of making use of everyone's potential. So all women and men must have the same opportunities and obligations in our Europe. And friends, a new dark chapter in Europe's history is being written right now. Vladimir Putin and the Russian political leadership and the war against Ukraine is despicable and reprehensible. They bear the direct responsibility for this war, and thus for the war crime, for the attacks on children and civilians in Ukraine. And Russia's illegal war is not only an attack on Ukraine, but it's also an attack on our fundamental values. It threatens peace and security all over Europe and the world. Ukraine being invaded by foreign power Russia because they want to exercise their right to freely and democratically choose their own path, because they want to live in an open and democratic society. So our message is clear also here. We stand united in the fight for Ukraine's right to live in peace, security, and democracy. And we do that because there is no alternative. Because if international law is not enforced, then lawlessness prevails. And then we can start asking what happens next. Who are the cannons aimed at next time? So here and now, continued support for Ukraine is needed. It has been and is still very crucial that the European Union is united. Olaf Scholz and Germany have taken unique decisions that strengthen the EU's overall defense capability. Sanna Marin in Finland, Magdalena Andersson in Sweden, the decision in this very new security environment to take Sweden and Finland into NATO strengthens the security of the whole of Europe. That Josep Borrell, through the European Peace Facility, strengthens the EU ability to act contribute to peace, and strengthen international law. We will need to do more to strengthen Europe and to protect our citizens, to face irrational aggression, and to continue to stand by Ukraine through concrete armed support to defend itself. Now the tensions are high again, and the threat of nuclear weapons frightens the whole world. It becomes clear again that the world must strive for common security. The need for global cooperation becomes even more clear. And I'm so glad that I've, together with Pedro Sanchez, been working with a global network to support the United Nations and to combine all the good forces. Thank you, Pedro, for that cooperation. So peace, dear friends, peace will always be our overarching objective. It is with democracy, international law, and human rights that we build a long-term sustainable peace. Friends, migration is another great challenges of our time. Let me start by saying that diversity enriches communities. But we also know that when integration does not work, the gaps in our societies risk increasing. There must always be a balance to ensure a successful integration and thus participation in the society. This, in turn, requires that the whole of Europe must take responsibility and shared joint responsibility. This is my clear experience from the refugee crisis in 2015. The right to asylum must be always protected. I would like to congratulate Ylva Johansson for successful work on the road to a common pact on migration and asylum. And we all know that the picture that we have seen from Syria, from the Mediterranean Sea, and from Ukraine makes it so clear. It is a matter of solidarity, but also responsibility. And as always, it is required that we Social Democrats lead the way, that we dare to take the tough decisions and stand up for our values. Friends, our family has been a driving force behind the European enlargement. It is gratifying that Moldova and Ukraine have been given a candidate status and that Georgia is aspiring. A clear commitment to the Western Balkan process must be followed by act. At the same time, it's important that every step of the enlargement process builds democratic institutions, because that is how we strengthen the rule of law and how we fight corruption. But bringing Europe together is about giving more people the opportunity for a better future, and also about strengthening Europe's security and sovereignty. We must also be aware of that Europe's security is based on the surrounding world. So therefore, we must build common security with other regions, with other countries. Europe is once again at a historic moment. We Social Democrats, we take responsibility for peace and security, for international law to prevail, and for a better future for everyone. Around the world, young people gather in climate demonstrations. And they, rightly so, demand that we politicians do more. It is their future that is at stake. The time for us that we have to reduce the emissions to reach the goal of 1.5 degrees is shrinking. But it has to be done. No question mark. It has to be done. This is our duty to the youth and the future generations. And I would like to change the narrative somehow about climate transition, because right now, for example, in the north of Sweden, we are witnessing a green industrial revolution that is creating 10,000 of new jobs. And at the same time, emissions are reduced. Places that people previously moved from are now building homes, schools, cultural centers at a speedy pace. Climate transition should not be a burden for the individual to bear on itself. This is a collective endeavor. Because climate transition is now the major societal development of our time. And we Social Democrats can show that climate transition will be both about saving our planet, but also improving the living conditions for everybody. And if we do this right, my friend, the most vulnerable in our societies will benefit the most, because we will have clean cities, warm houses, healthy food, and new jobs. And it's not only in the northern parts of Sweden that things are happening. The sustainable shift is going quite fast now. The energy crisis in itself is accelerating the necessary changes. That we must shape a fossil-free society and reach carbon neutrality by the latest 2050. And we Social Democrats also have a clear picture of how this is to be done. A European Green Deal with a strong social dimension is our priority. There are many to thank for this, not least Frans Timmermans, for having set high ambitions. Now clear financial mechanisms to drive the transitions are necessary to provide everyone with the conditions to take part in these tremendous opportunities, and no one can be left behind. A European Pact for Affordable Energy and Social Cohesion is urgent, so that our citizens can manage the winter. We need a European solution to lower the energy bills for both people and businesses, not least the small businesses. And in the end, through cheap fossil-free energy, we will wrestle the energy weapon out of Putin's hand. That, my friends, is a win-win situation that requires social democratic leadership. Friends, the fight for jobs is a fight against discouragement. The fight for jobs is a fight for equality, for individual freedom, and against individual guilt, and also the possibility to build welfare. And this is a struggle that we Social Democrats have always led. But in an economic crisis, people's security is often torn apart. I know, not least from my time in the trade union movement, that when crises strike, it is the jobs and homes of ordinary workers that is hit the hardest. It is often those who work hard, do their part, who also have to bear the heaviest burden in bad times. Having a job to go to is also one of the most important gender equality issues. And to be a social democrat is to be a feminist. And as a feminist movement, we fight for the women to have the same rights to freedom and security a job really entails. And PES, for me, is also synonymous with more and better jobs. The European Union has created jobs throughout our union, but the conditions differ. Getting a fair wage for work is a fundamental right. In the Nordic labor market model, that has been made possible through negotiations and collective agreements. Elsewhere, it is politically decided minimum wages that set the standard. I want to congratulate Nicola Schmidt on a job well done. Guaranteeing minimum wages is a success for large parts of Europe, and at the same time, it must never lead to worse conditions elsewhere. We must continue showing solidarity with each other and ensuring that wages and conditions are constantly improving across the European continent. And now the directive on platform work that strengthens workers' rights is long awaited, touching millions of people, and one of the most important issues in the near future, not least for us as the parties that represent workers. And now, friends, it was with pride that we laid the foundation for the social pillar during the Gothenburg summit. And the social summit in Portugal, under Antonio Costa's leadership, took the next steps and was important in providing continued momentum. And when the time comes for the next treaty, the overarching issue is to bring in social progress protocol that will give us the social Europe that our citizens actually are asking for. And our youth. The European Youth Guarantee has given young people hope, greater opportunities for jobs and a faith in the future. The European Child Guarantee would curb child poverty and give children the security they need. These are signature proposals from us as a political family. They show whose side we are on. It shows that who rules matters, and what could be more important for us than children and young people's safety and faith in the future. So friends, as I said, we live in troubled times. But we must never, ever let hopelessness overcome the belief that a better future is possible. We are driven by the conviction that the future is ours to shape. PES must be the force that shows that no political challenge is too big for us to solve together. Friends, it's a true honor to be part of this movement, and I look forward to leading, together with you, the political force that takes the fight for democracy, human dignity, peace, and climate. Thank you for your trust. Thank you.
They are going to be fast.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Stefan. With that speech, we open today really Met moed voor Europa, with Cards for Europe. And in that spirit, we move on to our next panel. Actually, the first one of today.
The next panel is Leading Europe Through Change. And indeed, we live in times of change. We may say, in a formula, in a nutshell, that the tragic decision of invading Ukraine by Vladimir Putin has changed everything. But for sure, it has changed the everyday life of the Ukrainians, transforming it into a nightmare of violence and suppression and aggression. For the rest of Europe, it has changed a big part of our certainties, our comfort, you may say. The idea that we were living in security, the idea that we were having energy supply always available. And to a certain extent, it has even put under threat our own concept and our own system of democracy. These challenges are not easy to be faced, but we can count on a group of leaders that have been showing their values, their power, their capacity in turbulent times, like the pandemics in this past couple of years, and that now are showing relentlessly solidarity with the Ukrainian people, making sure that Europe is united facing this war of aggression. We are talking about our prime ministers that sit in the European Council and that makes the difference for millions of European citizens. And we are very grateful for the job that you do.
We are. And actually, we want to welcome you. And Congress, please give them a warm applause. We welcome you on stage. Prime Minister of Spain, Pedro Sanchez. Prime Minister of Sweden, Magdalena Andersson. Prime Minister of Portugal, Antonio Costa. Prime Minister of Malta, Robert Abela.
Or I can stay here and... Dear Magdalena, I turn first to you for the first question. Under your leadership, there has been a new departure for Sweden defense cooperation with the rest of Europe. What are the implications for Europe and for Sweden of Russia's illegal war in Ukraine and the hostile rhetoric towards the West?
Well, Russia's illegal invasion of their friendly and democratic neighboring state of Ukraine changed everything. This was an aggression. It is illegal and it's undefendable. And therefore, the united response that we've had in Europe has been incredibly important. And I'm so proud of the decisions taken, both when it comes to sanctioning Russia, when it comes to supporting Ukraine, but of course also through strengthening the European Union and Europe as such. And I think the most important issue here is to continue. We need to continue our unity. We need to keep sanctioning Russia, and we need to keep supporting Ukraine as long as it is necessary, because we cannot let Russia win this war. This is an existential question for Europe. Because what would be with us? I mean, how could we explain if we would let Russia win this war? From Sweden and Finland, of course, this also fundamentally changed how we see upon our security and the security in the Baltic region. With long and deep discussions between me and Sanna Marin, the Prime Minister in Finland, we both countries decided to send in an application to NATO. And of course, this was a difficult discussion in our countries and of course also within our parties. But this was the right decision, and I'm very grateful to all of you for all the support that we have gotten from EU, NATO countries, European NATO countries, and the very quick ratification process. So thank you all so much for all the support.
Pedro, welcome as well. How important is it that we keep behind the Ukrainian people in the face of Russian aggression?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really, really important, as Madalena said, for the future of Europe and an international order based on rules. We have over 140,000 refugees coming from Ukraine in Spain. It's quite a large distance between Ukraine and Spain, but we are the fifth country receiving and hosting these refugees. And it's quite clear who is the aggressor and who is suffering the aggression. And we are with the people that are suffering the aggression, who are, of course, the refugees and Ukraine. So, you know, we have to keep that unity, as Madalena said. I think it's important to provide financial support, humanitarian aid, and of course, military capabilities for the Ukrainians. I think it's also a challenge for the European Union as a whole, because we have to, we cannot be naive. This is a challenge that Putin is also tabling against a democratic system that represents all of us, a common political project, which is the European Union. But having said this, I think it's also very important to send a clear message to the Russian population. We don't have anything against the Russian population. We have everything against the autocratic regime and Putin leadership. So, and then of course I think it's important to take into consideration two other dimensions of this crisis. The first one is the domestic side. I think it's important to provide European responses to all this mess, this energy crisis and inflation, and to provide answers to the international community, especially Africa, Asia, and Latin American countries, which are suffering also the consequences of this war, and trying to avoid that the economic sanctions that we are delivering against Putin and his regime hurt the economic possibilities and economic development of these countries. I think it's important that we keep in mind that the world is big. We are an important part of the world and in the international community, but we have many other regions that are suffering the consequences of this war, and they are willing to help us in I would say, in defending the international order based on rules.
Thank you.
Dear Antonio, the European Union has just granted the candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova. Is the European Union really ready to welcome these new countries among its membership?
Well, first of all, Putin cannot win this war, and we keep supporting Ukraine on a humanitarian basis, financial basis, and military basis. Peace must prevail, and we need stand for international law. We need also give full support to Antonio Guterres and United Nations efforts to solve the food crisis. We cannot forget that Africa, Latin America, all the world are suffering with this war, and we need to stand also on solidarity with all our friends in the world. Of course, Ukraine, like Moldova, Georgia, the Western Balkans, are members of our European family. And we need to take very seriously the enlargement process. That we cannot frustrate the high expectations that this enlargement creates in these countries. If we don't take very seriously this process, we will suffer the backlash in the future of the frustration of these expectations. That's what it means. First of all of the candidate states need to make a great efforts to reform their institutions. But the European Union need also reform our own institutions. Let me be clear. With our current rules, we are not fit to welcome these new member states. And if we want to be serious and consequent in our invitation to come to our own, we need to have strong European pillars to host these new members in our family. And they are very welcome.
Robert, welcome on stage too. So after leading Malta through the pandemic, your party was reconfirmed in March as the largest political force this year. Congratulations still. How have you managed to keep the trust of the voters?
I believe by delivering on the expectations of people and pushing through change and reforms with resolve. And we took over in January 2020, so the same party was in government, but we had a change in the leadership of the party. And there was a particular background. As probably all of you know, we had an unfortunate and sad episode in 2017 in Malta, which concerned the death of a journalist. And that episode gave rise to the need of a number of reforms. So reforms definitely related to the rule of law principles. So in 2020, the beginning of 2020, we embarked on a process, on a tough process, and meaningful reforms are definitely tough. So there is no other solution if you want to really make meaningful reforms other than to go through a tough process. So we embarked on a process where we changed the method of appointment of the police commissioner, the method of appointment of the judiciary, by ensuring that the executive, so the government arm, was totally detached from the method of appointment and scrutiny of the judiciary. We strengthened the permanent commission against corruption, and we did a plethora of other reforms. At that time, many people doubted us. Many people doubted whether we had the resolve to push those reforms through. And I think that the result of those reforms was delivered yesterday in Malta. Yesterday, we had a very important judgment where two people who were accused of the homicide of journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia were found guilty following their admission, condemned to 40 years imprisonment each. That follows another judgment where a third person was found guilty also of this murder. A further 3 people now await trial, and we have shown that when you do really make meaningful changes, meaningful reforms, then results will follow. And I think that the second point where people really trusted us and which led to us getting such a strong mandate way back on the 26th of March of this year was that our approach throughout the pandemic, so throughout this process of making reforms, then 2 months after starting this process, we were faced with the pandemic. So in March of 2020, Malta, which is very much dependent on the tourism economy, a third of our economy is dependent on the touristic sector, we had to literally close off our airport. So that meant the death toll to a third of the income of our economy. But we had to take those decisions to protect the health of our people. Contemporaneously, we took strategic decisions to support the income, the livelihoods of our people, and to support businesses. And we took a decision to issue a wage supplement, a minimum of 800 euros every month in the salary of our workers were guaranteed and paid by government. And we stood by our people throughout the pandemic. We stood by our businesses, we supported them by keeping electricity prices stable, fuel prices stable, issuing this wage supplement, which I just mentioned, postponement of the collection of taxes, among a number of other measures which we introduced to keep our economy moving forward. And we took that same approach in the earlier months of this year, both prior to the election and also after, when disaster literally struck following the war between Russia and Ukraine. There again, we took a very strategic decision to support totally the increase in electricity and fuel bills, meaning that government absorbed the increase in prices totally, both as regards electricity, as regards fuel, and as regards the liquefied natural gas. And I believe that support which we gave to our people made people convinced that we were the right administration to lead them forward. And I would tie up this issue to what is going to happen in the coming months. Let us not underestimate the importance of keeping the support of people behind us. if we lose that support, we risk the rise of populist movements. Not we risk, we're seeing the rise of populist movements. We're seeing the rise of right movements. So let us be very careful there. Let us not underestimate the importance of continually supporting our people. If people feel the economic pinch, and they are feeling the economic pinch related to the rise of inflation, to the inflationary costs related to food, related to energy, if people feel that they are being punished for something which definitely they do not share the blame for, then we risk losing their support. And the last point which I would like to make is, and I will definitely conclude on this point, is the importance of continuously bringing about change. So yes, right now we're focused on the war between Russia and Ukraine. We're focused on the energy prices. We're focused on tackling food insecurity. But there are also other themes and topics which touch the everyday lives of people. So whether we're talking about civil liberties, whether we're talking about health, whether we're talking about education. We just listened to the speech by Stefan. He mentioned the change or the sector of platform workers. This week, we made meaningful reforms in this important sector. And there we were faced also with an issue of principle in Malta. Our platform workers are all third country nationals, or mostly third-party nationals, almost 100% of them. So we could have turned a blind eye to the realities which these people are living through, or we could have reformed the sector. And we turned back to our principles, to our principle of social conscience, and there we decided to implement reforms which are being driven through right as we speak. Same as regards the child guarantee, which Stefan mentioned this week. We introduced further reforms to protect the most vulnerable of our families. Let us realize that investing in a solid, in a robust child guarantee will mean that we will have solid future generations. So the issue all lies about the courage to always bring about reforms, notwithstanding the challenges. Yes, we are crisis leaders, there is no doubt about that. Our tenure is perhaps one of the most difficult that history has experienced, but the courage to bring about further reforms and changes, be it in the rule of law, be it in all other areas, will definitely define the future of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Dear Magdalena, you have led your party to score the first in the last Swedish elections with more than 30%, and I think that this should be acknowledged by everybody as an amazing success. Unfortunately, the coalition you have been part of falls a bit short in respect to the opposing camp. The opposing camp saw the rise of far-right populist movement. What would be the priority of your party under your leadership to counteract this rise of far-right populism?
Thank you so much. I think it's important to say, I mean, we did a good election. We increased 2 percentage points, and we will be governing more in the more municipalities and more regions than we did before. But since the Conservative Party, the Christian Democratic Party, and well, now we have to say so-called Liberal Party, decided to cooperate with the Sweden Democrats rather than with us, this is a situation that it is a situation that we lost power on national level. Just say a few words about the Sweden Democrats. It's definitely a far-right party. It was created by neo-Nazis in Sweden, so it has deep neo-Nazi roots. But I mean, it's still a party with very questionable policies. For instance, their party leader, the week before the war, he was in a TV show asked if he preferred President Biden or President Putin. He couldn't choose. We have their party secretary. He was a teacher, but he was twice expelled as a school teacher because he was too radical anti-Islamist or anti-Muslim. He will now be leading the parliament's judiciary committee. We have one of their leaders who has been very vocal that Swedes with a Jewish background cannot be real Swedes. He will now lead the Swedish OSCE delegation. This is what's happening in Sweden right now. this party got 20% in the election. And I think it's very important to say, it's not like 20% of the Swedes do have these values. There are lots of good people that should be voting for us that are voting for this party now. So we have a homework that we have to do. And looking at this party, I think we have to think a lot, and Nicoletta and I have been speaking, we also have to learn from each other. And I think this is the discussion we have to have within PES. What is the best way to fight these parties? But I can say with the Sweden Democrat, number one, they did a very good election campaign. They have many very devoted party members that are spending a lot of time campaigning for their party. They're very strong in social media, much, much stronger than we are in social media. It's also the fact that the traditional right, they have been spending the last 4 years to legitimize this party, to normalize them, to really say this is a party like others. But just as I told you, they are definitely not. But this is, I think, the conviction among many Swedish voters is that this is just a party like others, and this is also what the traditional Swedish media is picturing them as. Then, of course, we do have the issue of migration. This is their number one issue. And Sweden have taken more refugees, did during the crisis 2015, more refugees than any more developed country had done before. And this, of course, is something that is still part of the discussion in Sweden when we are seeing the consequences in Sweden of that. And then on top of that, we know that they have more male voters than female voters. We know that those that vote for Sweden Democrats, they don't see a bright future for themselves, and they don't feel trust to society. And we have to ask ourselves, why are there so many men that feel this way in Sweden and also in other countries? The Sweden Democrats, they gained in almost all cities in Sweden. So all over the country, they have increased their votes. So this is something we have to analyze, right? And I think it's one of the really fundamental issues for my party in Italy, but I guess for others as well. Why don't people feel trust in society? Why don't they feel that there is a better future for them? And we have to do our homework to make sure that we can tell the story and have the right policy so that people can feel that politics, social democratic politics, we do have the answer for the problems that they are seeing right now. And we do have it. I mean, it's really people, citizens in Europe, they're asking for more policies. They are asking for more social democratic policies, but we have to be more vocal, at least I have to say. I have to be more vocal, and Swedish Social Democrats have to be more vocal to explain that, yes, we do have the answers to the problems that you see in your everyday life.
Thank you, Magdalena. Thank you for those lessons learned, and thank you for the self-reflection as well. I think we can really learn from this in the coming years. Antonio, yesterday and today we heard the climate emergency mentioned many times, of course, as one of the first priorities of our progressive movement. Has the ongoing war in Ukraine jeopardized our commitment?
No, on the contrary. I think the current situation is a wake-up call for everybody to accelerate the energetic transition. If we want to become free for fuel dependence from Russia, we need to invest more on renewables, sun, wind, hydro, and in the future, green hydrogen and other renewable gases. This is the future. And we need a full-fledged union of energy. And that means we need to build interconnections between all our member states to can share the best energy you produce and afford everybody with the energy that we need. And we can never forget, if we want to win on this energy transition, we need to have the support of our people. If we want to avoid to fool the populist, we need to tackle the price of energy. And that is urgent if you want not to lose the people and to win this battle to energy transition to fight climate change. This is the time to do this.
Antonio already touched on this topic, but Pedro, yourself, together with Antonio, you have took the lead to initiate the reform of this dysfunctional energy market. So what are the lessons that also the rest of Europe can learn from your experience?
Well, I think that the main lesson would be that we need to intervene in the market, which is not functioning at all. Having said this, I do believe that there are different concepts. The first one is reform. I think that we need to align our responses to this energy crisis together with the other bigger crisis, which is the climate crisis. That is why in my country it's important what we are developing, which is all the green transition. And we are not using this crisis as an excuse to postpone our goals and commitments regarding the green transition. Of course, I think, and I plead the Commission, I would do it again in the Council as many others, socialists, but I think it's important to reform the market and to decouple the gas prices from the electricity prices. This is something that we need to face and do it as soon as possible. So first, reforms aligned with the other crisis, which is the climate crisis. Second, protection, social protections to middle-income households and, of course, the most vulnerable. This is what we are doing. I think it's important to face a European solution also for our enterprises, industries, and of course, families. In this regard, I think what we did together with the Portuguese comrades, it is, it has positive outcomes. Just to put on the table some figures, some numbers, we already saved for the Spanish consumers more than 2.6 billion euros with this intervention of the gas that generates electricity in the Iberian Peninsula. The third concept, in my opinion, apart from reforms, protection, would be solidarity, as Antonio has mentioned, which means that the Iberian Peninsula is not interconnected at all with the European grid. And just to say in a number, in Spain, for instance, we concentrate 1/3 of the total regasification capacity of whole Europe. So if we want to be solidar, and we want to, with other countries that are much more vulnerable to this, hybrid war, using energy, as Antonio said, by Putin against the European economy and the European industry, I think it's important to provide those alternatives, speeding up the interconnections from the Iberian Peninsula with the rest of the European Union. And one last word is that in every crisis, there are some big companies that win a lot of money. And we need to tax them for these extraordinary profits. And this is what we are doing in Spain, and of course we are asking to do so in Europe.
Robert, very big question, maybe.
I'll try to compress
Try
the
to
answer.
open.
I'll do my
So,
best.
what further changes do you see ahead for Europe?
I think it all depends on how we tackle the current issues, be it the war between Russia and Ukraine. So that is where I believe we have a point of diversion or divergence in how we are seeing things. A number of countries are seeing things. We all agree that we must keep fully supporting Ukraine. There is no doubt that on that point of principle. But last week we were in Prague, and I did not even listen or hear the word peace even once. Luckily today, in our earlier discussions, this theme has been touched upon. But are we really pushing forward for more meaningful peace talks? Are meaningful peace talks compatible with insisting of a win on one side or the other. Those are two questions which I think need to be addressed. So, we definitely do not want Russia to win this war. No doubt about that. But will we ever bring an end to this if we do not engage in meaningful peace talks? And I do believe that the potential for peace talks always remains. Malta has been advocating the theme for peace for a number of months now, not just in the issue of the war between Russia and Ukraine, but also on a more general theme. So I'm just giving this as a food for thought. Let's keep discussing on this issue. The second point, which will, I think, shape the future of Europe, is how we tackle other important matters. The theme of migration was very rightly addressed by Magdalena. It is a very pressing issue for a number of countries, be it Sweden, be it Greece, be it Malta. We have different routes of our migration issues, and by routes I'm not just referring to the migratory flows, but also to the causes. So in the case of Malta, our main source of migratory flows is that definitely in our southern borders, and it is Libya. And we have been putting forward the issue of Libya on the agenda now for a number of years. And unfortunately, I cannot really say that the principle of solidarity has been ever applied. Italy and Malta have been left to fend on their own. Let us also understand now that there is a change in the Italian government, which could also lead to a shift in the policy relating to migration, which could affect each and every one of us. Malta has been advocating very much on the issue of solidarity. Sweden have taken disproportionate burdens, so has Malta in these last years. And the only solution which we have been advocating for, as Beppe knows, Commissioner Johansson was here earlier, the issue that we have to tackle the problems on the ground, at source, on the Libyan shores. And going back now and tying these two issues, the issue of the war in Ukraine and the issue of Libya, they are two separate issues, but can also be seen to be intertwined. Yesterday, we have all read about the atrocities in the Ukraine, the mass rapes which have been experienced. But let's also understand that people in Libya are dying each and every day. Migrants are being lost at sea. Children are being lost at sea. We had an episode, a heartbreaking episode, a few days ago, where a 4-year-old child died of thirst when crossing between Libya and Greece. And the issue resolved into one as to which country was to take the blame for not intervening. Let us not underestimate these humanitarian issues. That is what we are experiencing each and every day, what we have been seeing these last years. So let us not underestimate the issue of Libya. The last point, and this was very well addressed also by Antonio, the issue of turning the energy crisis into an opportunity. Taking the case of Malta, we have a lot of wind, we have a lot of sun, people travel to Malta to enjoy the sun, but we have only 11% of our energy needs which are being generated by renewable sources. So that is something which everyone agrees that is rather strange. We have the sea, and we have not exploited the resource of the sea over the last year. So this current energy crisis has left us with no other alternative but to push forward and seek solutions. The other issue is that we are limited in land space. So being a small island of 500,000 people, the land space is what it is. So it is not just a simple question of installing more solar panels. There is no space to install wind farms, no space to install wind turbines. So the obvious solution was to go offshore. There again, there lies an issue of permitting. So if we want the solution of increasing the percentage of renewables to come at a fast pace, we need to address the permitting issue. If we do not get fast permitting, then we're going to push the projects forward. As things stand, if we do have a fast permitting process, these projects will still take 3, 4, 5 years, perhaps even 6 years to materialize. So the importance of agility there is something which I think really needs to be pushed forward. We're also looking at a solution perhaps also at Commission level. But let us not underestimate the importance of acting in an agile manner. The last thing, and I will close off on this point, the importance of staying close to our people, keeping the support of people behind us, and that is what will really shape the future of Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Antonio, you have been practically always leading your government and your country in turmoil, turbulent times, in times of real crisis, European, worldwide ones. I have to say that you did it successfully because at the last elections he scored more than 40%. And I think this should be also acknowledged as an outstanding result. Yet again, today, we have said it, we are facing multiple challenges that finally result into a new economic crisis. How should Europe react to all of this?
Well, we have to learn from the previous crisis. We have done very bad 10 years ago on the financial crisis, when we left each member state in their own, and we built the policy driven by austerity. But we have done very well to face the COVID crisis, not only on the joint procurement of vaccines, but also because on this time, we don't answer driven by austerity, but driven by solidarity. And we found a common answer for a symmetric crisis. And we can never forget that instruments like SURE or Next Generation save companies, save jobs, save wages, save people, save our Europe, was the best instruments against populism and was instruments based on solidarity and social democratic values. We have been facing consecutive crises for the last 15 years. Financial crisis, climate crisis, pandemic crisis, now a war. That means we need a permanent stabilizing mechanism to face and to tackle this crisis. And on the time being, you need to accelerate the instruments that we have already. We have already Next Generation. We have already Repower EU. Then we need to accelerate to execute what we have already, but we need to create a permanent instrument because what is the big lesson? The big lesson. They are always a crisis waiting for you. And then we need to have a permanent instrument to tackle this crisis.
Thank you, Antonio. And we touched upon this subject already before with Antonio and Pedro. Magdalena, what is your take on how we can ensure the continued commitment of our citizens to a sustainable future away from fossil energy?
I think just what Stefan Löfven said, which is showing that this climate transition, green transition, is not about losing jobs. It's not about lower growth. It's not about a more boring life, but the opposite. The green transition is something that is right now creating jobs with good wages. It is creating investments, creating higher growth. And we see it in the northern part of Sweden right now. It's a fantastic development. So many people are moving there. They need to build their houses, they need to build schools, they need to build infrastructure because of all these investments. And this is what we have to show to our citizens, that this is not a boring future. It is a glorious future that is awaiting us. And this is the right thing to do, because we have to save the climate. This is a question of security policy, is very obvious to us right now, but this is also a question of jobs and growth for the future.
Dear Robert, we have seen in Europe growing political forces that are nationalist, that are populist, that are radical in that sense. your leadership and your party has shown in the course of many years that you have been always able to keep them at bay in your island. Does the international cooperation help to convince citizens to not fall into the nationalistic rhetorics?
Going back to the system which we have in Malta, it is mostly a bi-party system. So two major political parties are represented in parliament, but we do have a small number of parties who share the confidence of a small minority of our people. But during the last general election and in following polls, it has been noted that there is an increasing number of people who are perhaps doubtful of the two major political parties. And that is a sentiment which we really need to address. And how can we address the benefit of international cooperation in that formula? By delivering results. And I must admit that I do have a bit of a difficulty in explaining the benefits, so I'm fully convinced of the importance of international cooperation, but come the end of the coming week's council, the media will be asking me questions of what has been the outcome of that council and what benefit the measures which will be decided upon at this council will give to the Maltese people. And up till now, I still have no reply in that context. So I am optimistic, cautiously optimistic, that we will manage to come to a number of meaningful conclusions, but our people will ask us, mostly in the energy sector, has there been the application of the principle of solidarity when it comes to the energy sector, insofar as concerns the particular position of small island member states? Up till now, as we speak, the answer would be in the negative. I hope that in the coming days, I would be able to provide a different reply to our people. But in Malta, going back to how we tackled the rise of populist movements, particularly as regards the issue of migration, we have taken a very clear migration policy, which I think has worked out well. As regards the negative impacts of inflation and other financial pressures, which obviously give much room then to maneuver to populist movements. Obviously, populist movements have the advantage of being able to speak a lot and not being in the driving seat, because when you are in the driving seat, then things tend to change when you come face to face with reality. But there again, the success, I think the secret formula lies in keeping very close to what people are expecting of us, in treating them with respect, in understanding that, yes, people are suffering, and let us not underestimate the effects of 2.5 years of pressures related to the pandemic, be it solitude, be it having people confined in the space of their homes, not being able to go out to work, or not being able to shop. That was one particular type of pressure which also led to psychological issues other than financial issues. Now, people are faced with inflationary pressures which obviously are taking a pinch on their pocket. So, yes, let's keep this international dialogue moving forward, but then we also have to deliver important results. The last point, Antonio also mentioned it, in 2010-8, everyone pushed forward with an economic formula of austerity. It failed miserably. It gave rise to an increased unemployment rates, investment lessened, and we took literally years to recover from that recession. Now, as we move forward, I think the formula there has changed to one of incentivizing our businesses, to one of incentivizing our workers. Yes, I do appreciate what Pedro is saying, that a windfall tax would be one of the solutions on the excessive profits which energy companies are making. I would also advocate another formula. So yes, let's not exclude talk of a windfall tax, but also let's latch onto the financial muscle which these energy companies have. If we are to materialize our renewable projects, renewable energy projects, what we're doing in Malta is we're latching onto the investment of the private sector. There is no way on earth that our governments can inject the capital which is needed, the huge capital which is needed to make these investments. So I think it is a two-pronged approach. Yes, let's, if need be, tax on excessive profits, but also let's lock onto this financial muscle which these companies have registered to incentivize them to invest in renewables. More in renewables will mean much lower unit rates related to the production cost and distribution of electricity. So let's look at things holistically. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question of this panel goes to you, Pedro. And I'm happy that your microphone is working today. You are a strong proponent of UN reform. As socialists, as internationalists, how can we lead the world through change?
Together with my dear friend Stefan, we belong to this group. The two main questions, apart from the climate change in the General Assembly of the United Nations, were first, how do we allocate financial resources to the less developed countries after the pandemic and nowadays with these terrible consequences of the energy crisis? And the second was the food crisis. And I think that taking into consideration that we know what are the big problems, what we need is a much more effective multilateral system. I mean, of course, we tend to reform from 0 to 100 everything in a very short period of time. I think we have to be much more humble. We have to be much more intelligent and go step by step. That means, for instance, regarding this allocation of financial resources to the less developed countries, I think that we reached a very good agreement to allocate 20% of our SDRs through this new fund created under the umbrella of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which is this resilient fund, and Spain was the first country in the world to commit ourselves with this allocation of 20% of our SDRs in the fund. And regarding the international food crisis, I believe, as Antonio mentioned before, we need to support and back Antonio Guterres as Secretary General of the United Nations. I think it's important that we coordinate all the efforts that Europe, different countries all around the world are, delivering or deploying together with United Nations. Second, I think it's important to avoid unilateral decisions to close our borders for trading grains or fertilizers. Third, we need to do our home. And finally, and this is the last work, I think it's important that we extend the agreement reached together between the Russians and the Ukrainian government regarding this, Black Sea initiative to export grain and fertilizers from Ukraine to the rest of the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Prime Ministers. It was an honor to have you on stage. Everyone is very proud of you and of your work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Antonio.
Thank you.
Robert.
Muchas gracias. I know. Sorry.
So that was wonderful to hear our Prime Ministers for being here today and all the work that they are doing. Building a Europe with strong progressive values, one that works for fairness, sustainability, and fights for democracy and freedom.
And we do believe in standing for freedom, standing for democracy, standing for international law, standing for fundamental rights. And this is why we stand with Ukraine. It's not only empty words, it's not only empty rhetorics. There are actions that we do, that we did as a party back in Brussels, actions of solidarity. We have been leading a delegation with Sergei a few months ago at the border between Poland and Ukraine to show our solidarity and our support to the people that were fleeing the conflict and also to those in Poland that were helping them, giving them shelter. We would like to take a stock at this of what has happened in the past months, in the past 8 months, since the tragic invasion of Ukraine took place, by showing you this on a video.
we will be able to tackle Russia's extortion and the long winter, but we need unity, determination and courage to do that. And when we calculate the price of war in euros, the Ukrainians are calculating it in human lives. We are not just talking about Ukraine, but we are talking about European values and the entire international rule-based system.
Russlands Eroberungskrieg gegen die Ukraine ist durch nichts zu rechtfertigen. Präsident Putin führt ihn mit einem einzigen Ziel, sich der Ukraine zu bemächtigen. Selbstbestimmung und politische Unabhängigkeit zählen für ihn nicht. Dafür gibt es nur ein Wort. Das ist blanker Imperialismus.
And Europe has shown its solidarity already in a very powerful way, but it has to increase because the crisis will not go away next week. And we have to protect these people as we are doing until now for the future as well.
In this dark hour, our thoughts, our solidarity and our resolve are with the Ukrainian people.
The UN Charter is clear. Any annexation of a state territory by another state resulting from the threat or use of force is a violation of the principles of the UN Charter and international law.
Здесь для того, чтобы жить в свободной Украине, там, где
Well, that were images in a video, but now it's really, really an honor to present a Ukrainian musical act, the ensemble Muria. I hope I pronounce it a little bit right. These are 4 musicians, all with Ukrainian roots, living in Germany. And the ensemble is part of a broader initiative to help Ukrainian musicians and advocate for Ukrainian music in these challenging times. They will perform a piece, Melody, by the Ukrainian composer Miroslav Skorik. So please, a warm welcome for Muria. The floor is yours. Ladies and gentlemen, Moria. Bravo. Bravo. Well, that was difficult not to get a bit emotional. But we go to our next guest. And many of you in this room throughout Europe have met him during his Tour de France, during our common candidates election campaign in 2019. I would like to welcome on stage Executive Vice President of the European Commission and my former boss, Frans Timmermans.
Good morning, Congress. Great to see all of you here in Berlin today. I'm so proud of my family. Music speaks to the heart. Music brings consolation to those in the most dire of circumstances, and Maria have shown this again today. Those men and women fighting in Ukraine today, putting literally their lives on the line and very often having to pay the highest price. Those people are fighting for their freedom. But they're also fighting for our freedom. But let's make no mistake. Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Putin's agenda is also about defeating democracy, about spreading autocracy, about his army of orcs trying to turn our world into his world. And this cannot happen. It is tempting for me to go in many of the things that Stefan has said, but he said it so well, I couldn't do it better. It is also tempting for me to say what is so wrong about the extreme right. And we all share these ideas. But I also know that if you have a restaurant, you will not get customers into your restaurant by pointing to the horrible menu of another restaurant. People will only want to come to your restaurant if your menu is good and if they like what you're selling. So, obviously, we could go into the many reasons why the extreme right are bad, but why are so many people voting for them and not for us? That is the question we should be answering. I think our agenda is quite clear. First of all, we see the center-right putting power before anything else. And they are prepared to align themselves with the extreme right in the assumption that would normalize the extreme right. But in fact, it's drawing the center-right out of the center. So friends, are we prepared to offer an alternative, not just to the left, but also to the center? I would say yes. Are we prepared to say very clearly that we will not choose political opportunism and do the same, what the Germans call Fahnenflucht, the same desertion of the center to go to the radical left or even further? We will not do that. We will also be there for the people in the center of goodwill who are looking for solutions for their problems. They should know there is someone listening to them, there is someone who wants to act for them. So let's never abandon the center. We are left and center left, and that is our creed. My second point is this. We will have to play a role in convincing the center-right not to choose this path. I believe the center-right is a force in our European history that has also contributed to create a strong, socially based market economy, and I know there are still people in the center-right who believe in that. They have to remain potentially people we want to work with. But if they flee from the center, there is no way we can work with them again. So we have to make them this offer: stay in the center, and let's find common solutions for the problems of our citizens. And then, of course, we know that the extreme right has been cloaking itself in respectability over the last 10 to 15 years, and many of our citizens, especially younger citizens, do not really appreciate the roots and the really ideas behind this. So we also have to contribute to decloaking them, to showing who they really are, to show that what they're going after is the rights of women, to show what they're going after is the rights of our LGBTI community, to show to them that what they're going after is our liberties. The liberty of the press, the liberty of expression, the liberty of the media is under attack by them, and we should show that so that people wake up. So what do we have to offer? I think if I look at what's happening to our parties in elections, I see very clearly that we are being rewarded if we are reliable, if we deliver what we promise, if we show that nobody will be left behind concretely, if we are compassionate. Now, some of the extremes have invented this new thing, which is in fact a very old thing, which is what they call power, which is in fact callous masculinity. And I, as a feminist, would like to call upon all of us, let us show that there is something called compassionate masculinity as a driving force for the rights of men and women. We will not be able to fulfill our long-term agenda if we do not fully address the short-term concerns of our citizens. But we will not be able to substantially contribute to the short-term concerns of our citizens if this policy is not embedded in our long-term agenda. That is the essential task of progressive politics, of social democracy and of democracy in Europe, to show that we can do something about these idiotic energy prices now, but at the same time this is embedded in a policy that will take us to a sustainable future with clean energy, clean cities, affordable transport for people, affordable housing. So let's use the next couple of years to use the funds we have in Europe to put solar panels on everyone's roof, to make sure everyone has access to insulation, to heat pumps, that everyone has access to affordable public transport, to affordable healthcare, to better education for their children. Let's show that there is something like a socially sustainable transition to a sustainable society. This transition will be just, or the just will be no transition. This should be the message of socialists and social democrats across Europe. And my final point, my friends, is this: never allow yourself to be discouraged. Never allow yourselves to lose eye of the ball. Never allow yourselves to let others tell you that we are a movement of the past. And never allow yourselves to become so nostalgic that also we start living in the past. We have to live with the past, not in the past. Living with the past will give us the force to shape the future. We do this for everyone, for our children, for our grandchildren, for those in society who have trouble taking care of themselves. We will empower them so that they will face the future with more confidence, more trust, and more optimism. Thank you very much.
Franz Timmermans, one of the most inspirational leaders that our family has ever had. I have to confess that being with him and with Sar and with the team of PES running the campaign for the Spitzencandidate in 2019 has been a life experience that I am extremely grateful, honored, and proud of having done. And the fight that he continues to fight for all of us, for our family, inside the Commission, in Europe and in all international contexts, are simply the signal that the representation of his relentless determination to never let go. And this is something that should be followed as an example for all the new generations. And his words, I think, were the perfect preparation for the second panel of today, which is Our Europe, Respect for the Planet.
And for this panel, we want to welcome on stage President of the SD Group in the European Parliament, Irache Garcia. Welcome. European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights, Nicolas Schmid.
Change my flight, I can do it.
Leader of the SPO, Austria, Pamela Wagner. Randy Wagner. Welcome. And leader of PES Belgium, Paul Magnet. This panel will be moderated by our colleagues Jonak and Caroline. I need the activist. Where is he? Can someone find me Jose? Sorry, that's difficult. He was supposed to stand here. No?
Thank you all for being here with us today. And as we tackle the timely issue of the current energy crisis and the green transition, energy security, energy affordability, and energy efficiency are of great concerns of our citizens and businesses alike. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has made it even more clear and more urgent to act, as all of our leaders told us. It creates immediate challenges, but it's also a wake-up call for those who still doubted that the Green Deal is the future of Europe. Decarbonization provides a challenge, but also a great opportunity. Our goal is to meet the targets set out in the Green Deal, because the future should and must be green.
Yes, today we should discuss both the challenges that we are facing today, but also the future, and discuss about our strategy for a green future and how the best we can implement it. So I'm very glad that we are here all together to hear your views and proposals. And let me start with the leader of the SD Group in the European Parliament. I turn to Irache. Irache, recently in the European Parliament, you have adopted a resolution calling to stop the increase of energy price. So if you could please to tell us what are the main SD calls in these regards.
Of course, thank you. If you ask me about the principal goal, our main goal in this resolution was a call for an urgency. All of you know how are suffering our people, our society, our vulnerable families, and really, we need to act very quickly. We cannot wait more time. We push for a debate and resolution of this subject. First of all, to send a clear signal that the Commission and Council need to act, and they need to do it now. Second, we fought for a holistic view of the crisis. I will come later on the main calls related to energy markets, but we cannot limit ourselves to those. This is why the resolution has a strong social chapter, calling for a reform of SURE, protection of vulnerable consumers, and recognition of the social dialogue. It's very important, this question. We were working with the trade unions on this content, and really for us was important to include the social dimension. Going back to the energy market, I must start by recalling that this is not our first resolution of the subject. For a year, the S&D Group is discussing and proposing solutions to keep the bills down. As immediately actions, we call for a price cap of imported pipeline gas, the setup a joint procurement mechanism, a reform of the electricity market, and the coupling of gas and electricity price. And at the end, the speculation of the TTF gas markets and transparency on acquisition price. We ask for development and for alternative benchmarks for pipeline gas and LNG. We also need to accelerate the development of the key infrastructures. We had in the last panel Prime Minister speaking about this important question. And lastly, because we are here in a panel of respect for the planet, the resolution recognizes the central role the development of renewable have been that of increasing our energy efficiency.
Nicholas, happy to have you here. Very warm welcome. The PES main concern is to ensure that the green transition is just, of course. It puts people and the planet on an equal footing. And the question now is, how can we make the best use of the transition to address the climate and environmental challenges, but also improve working conditions and employment prospects for all in Europe?
Thank you very much. First, to say that there is no opposition between the right climate policy and good social policy. There is no opposition between planet and people. We cannot help save people without also saving the planet. And I think this is the big lesson also. And we as Social Democrats and Socialists have to make this clear, because we have talked a lot about the extremists, the populists. They always try to play people and ecological or climate policy ones against the other. No, there is no division between both. What we have to do now is to show that investing in climate policy, changing our energy model, transforming our industry, and we have heard this from our Swedish friends, from the Prime Minister from Sweden, how climate policy, how the transformation of industry can really offer good opportunities for good jobs, how we can revive our industry in Europe. And I think the biggest challenge is now certainly to find urgent measures to cap prices, to help people in their income, but also to save companies, by the way, who are suffering from this irrational price increases. And here also what Pedro Sanchez said and what you repeated about the foolishness of the market. We have to cut this off and we have to change this, because the markets are turning crazy, and they are turning crazy for the benefit of some big companies or for Putin himself, by the way. So this is something we have really to change. And therefore, I think the good opportunities are in jobs, in quality jobs. And therefore, the message is we have now to accelerate the transformation. We have to invest more into renewables, new energy patterns. This has been said also by the prime ministers. And this is the challenge, and this means also that people can have a better income, a good income, better working conditions, and that means also that we have invest into people. We cannot have a big transformation of our economy without investing in people. And that's about skills policy, that's about education, that's about research, and this is the vision of a more solidarity society, which we can combine with saving the planet and helping our people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you, and I'm turning to Pamela Rendi-Wagner, the leader of the Social Democratic Party of Austria. Pamela, inequalities and rising inequalities have always been one of the main concerns of our family. So what is the impact of climate change policy on reducing inequalities? Can you tell us what green policy can be used also in order to have more equal societies?
Well, thank you for your question. First of all, I mean, social inequality is one of the most urgent problems we are facing with or without climate crisis, because it harms common people it threatens economic growth, it threatens employment, and most of all, we discussed a lot last night at the dinner, it threatens our democracies, and it's a fertile soil for the right wings. So this is for us a big problem to tackle. But when it comes to climate crisis, of course we know that every crisis produces many losers and some winners. And it's the utmost responsibility of policymakers, of governments, to fight against this development. And this is also true when it comes to climate crisis, because the climate crisis affects, of course, the low-income groups of our society most. It affects the most vulnerable groups most, the elderly, the sick, the women. So this is our importance, and Niklas has pointed out a lot of things, and Stefan in his speech today. How do we do that? How do others do that? How does politics react? Well, there are the Greens, and the Greens react to this by moralizing. They are moralizing all the time for years and years. And then there are the right wings. They are denying. They deny the climate change completely. And then it's us. It's us to give the right answer, to lead the way forward. And how do we do this? We do this, of course, we have to do it with a common, strong European answer. And it needs an active state, not only in the crisis, of course, but in particularly now, an active state who guides and shapes this important energy transition process, which is without any alternative. And we have to do this actively. It has to be duty of the state to do this. Not only we need a strong social welfare state, we need also a strong state to guide this process in order to guarantee that it is a just transition, as Niklas has just right now said. A just transition, leaving nobody behind in our societies, protecting the industry, protecting employment and jobs, creating new jobs, and looking for equality rather than inequality, which would happen if the politics does nothing against it. And now, when I come to my end to answer your question, and this has also been topic of our yesterday's dinner talks, I think we need to be the one giving hope, giving perspective, optimism. We should not talk too much about crisis. I mean, their crises are there. People feel it every day, so hard. The pandemic, now the inflation and the cost of living crisis. But we need to be the party and the political movement giving the optimistic approach. And I felt this actually in the Prime Minister's panel very much. I was so happy to listen to the Prime Ministers giving this optimistic way out approach for our societies and for Europe. And every crisis is a chance. And so is the crisis, the climate crisis. It's a chance for new jobs, for more jobs. It's a chance for economic growth and prosperity for everybody. It's a chance for more equality in our society and a healthy future for everybody. That in the end, European citizens will say, Europe is not only saving and rescuing banks after the financial and banking crisis 10 years ago. Europe is saving us and protecting us. This should be our goal together.
Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. From the message of hope to another part, to our friend Paul Magnette from PES Belgium, the financing part, Paul. Your party has been long calling for the implementation of windfall taxes on energy companies. And what is the added value of this measure?
Well, thank you. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, everyone. This is, I think, a very important issue indeed. Yes, we can do it, and yes, we did it. We did it this week. We decided in Belgium to tax the windfall profits. And we decided, some people were saying, well, those windfall profits do not exist. Yes, we did. They do exist. We have taxed them. We even went much beyond the European agreement, and this will bring us 3 billion euros. That, of course, we immediately give back to the citizens, because they need it. We redistribute it directly on the energy bill. But dear friends and comrades, let's be honest. This is the least we can do. This is urgent and we need to do it. But we need to tackle the problem and we need to go back at the roots of the problem. In a normal society, in a normal Europe, windfall profits should simply not exist. They exist because the market doesn't work. And so, yes, we have to take the problem at the roots. This implies in the short run, Irache, Pamela, Nicolas, Pedro this morning, everyone has said it. Dear friends, prime ministers, we need you. We need to freeze energy prices and we need to do it now. People need to know that we support them this winter. And this again will not be enough. This again will not be enough because I was a minister in charge of energy and climate 12 years ago, at a time when we were discussing liberalization of European energy markets. I've never been enthusiastic. I've always thought, well, this must be a mistake. Energy is not a good like any other goods. We should never have left energy to the markets, and we have to draw the lessons. We, the Social Democrats, have to say it. It doesn't work. It will never work. We need to build energy sovereignty again. We need to take back control.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. And I'm turning now to Irache on fighting for energy affordability. Has always been a priority for the SD Group, for the PES, for our family. So today we are facing this unique challenge. How do we fight climate change and ensure also continuous access to affordable energy? So can we do both at the same time?
Of course we can do it. Conservative parties in the European Parliament are trying to send a clear message. With this war, it's totally impossible, our Green Deal, and we have to stop. We have to stop our transition, and we have to stop our principal goals. And really, we need to be very clear with this question. It's not the time to stop our challenges. We have to ensure that we will work in a Green Deal, and we are working on it, of course. Sometimes I try to explain that this war put us in front of a mirror. This mirror can send us our strengths, but at the same time, our weakness. And our weakness is our fossil fuel, for example, dependency. We have to work in this line, and we have to put for an alternative energy and to push for a renewable energy. It's very important. We are working on it with our Commissioner France, and in this moment we are in a strong negotiation with the Council to have a final agreement with the Green Deal, and really, it's the moment to push for it. I'm sure that the younger generation have a very clear idea about what we have to do it. And I will insist on it. We have to do it. We need to keep our commitment with the Green Deal, but always thinking in the social dimension. Because if not, this transition will be paid for the more vulnerable people. And for this reason, it's very important to insist on it. And we are the only political family who are defending this. But in any case, speaking about if it's possible to guarantee both, of course, we are working on it. We need to act, like we explained, to try to cut the energy price, but at the same time, we have to invest more in a renewable policy, and I'm sure that we will work in the different perspective with the European Commission and with our governments on this right direction.
Thank you, Irache. Nicolas, let's talk about SURE, one of the European programs that protected 1.5 million jobs during COVID-19. What future do you see for other of these kinds of instruments?
Well, as you said, SURE protected millions of jobs, I think. SURE gave a signal to the European Union and to the member states that the pandemic was an exceptional crisis, and we had to use exceptional means. And it was the first step, followed then by the Recovery and Resilience Plan. And now we are again in some kind of an exceptional crisis. where our economies are hit, but where people, households, are equally hit also. And therefore, I think we have also to use exceptional means, exceptional resources. And I think this is the challenge. And we should draw out of SURE that lesson, that if solidarity is there at the European level, we can really cope with the challenges. And this challenge is now huge. We have seen it. It's about, first, helping people, supporting households through diminishing energy prices, certainly, but also by helping industry. And we have a danger that Europe again, and that happened already during the COVID crisis, that Europe is dividing, that the internal market is not functioning because it's fragmented. Those who can put on the table a lot of billions and those who are more with restricted means. And we have now discussed about taxing exceptional profits. That's obviously one solution to mobilize resources. But we also have to mobilize resources to save people, households, and our economy. Because many sectors all over Europe are under heavy, heavy pressure. I will go afterwards to a steel plant about 100 kilometers from here. People are extremely worried about their future, about their jobs, but also about the industrial substance which we have to reinforce in Europe, not weaken it, reinforce, transform in the context of the green transition. And that's why we need a solid European instrument. Call it SURE 2, call it whatever you want. But we need, again, to show European solidarity, to bring our efforts together, and to save people, to save jobs, and at the same time, to make Europe stronger.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nicolas. Thank you. And to Pamela now, a new question. We have talked a lot about how we can go out of this crisis. And so I turn to you to see also what lesson can we take out from this crisis and how can we speed up now the process for a green transition?
Well, to my mind, the most important lesson we should draw out of it is we must do as social democrats, because nobody else is doing it, we as social democrats must do our utmost to stop this energy crisis becoming a social crisis. This is the most important topic and lesson we have to learn and we have to tackle. And this has to be in our mind by every measure we are taking on a European or on a national level. And yes, we have to speed up. I think time is really essential. And I think you mentioned winter. The winter will be very critical because people need to heat and they will need to pay their bills and they will come within the next months, maybe beginning of next year. And people will not afford that if nothing happens. Because as you said, I mean, we found out that this European electricity market is not working anymore. Maybe it has worked 10 years ago, but now for the last years and for the last months, we find out this is not normal what is happening when it comes to energy prices, electricity prices, when it comes to the supply problems, when it comes to the transition, how to make the transmission. The market alone will not solve this problem. It creates the problem. It is the problem. And so we need to get rid of this problem, friends, and we have to regulate. And I think this is what we need to interfere in short term. There are concepts on the table from Frans Timmermans, from the European Commission, a European solution. I think this is the way forward with a common joint procurement of gas and a subsidized price for gas for the industry, for the private households, and also for gas power stations, which brings down automatically the electricity prices as well. We have to fight the causes of the problem and not only the symptoms. I'm the doctor to speak. A symptom therapy will not help in this really, really existential crisis. We need to tackle the causes of this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. Energy affordability, Pamela already mentioned it, Paul. I would like to hear your views on how we can keep electricity prices in check and what measures are you calling for in Belgium?
Well, thank you again, Caroline, and I fully agree with Pamela. We Social Democrats must be the party of hope. There are many people today who make statements, and statements are very easy. We talk with the citizens every day. We live with our citizens and we know what people live. There are many people criticizing everything, but we are the only ones proposing solutions and implementing those solutions. And the citizens do know it. After the First World War, during the big economic depression of the interwar period, after the Second World War, after the big depression of the 1970s, the citizens always came to us, to the Social Democrats, to get an answer. And this time again, we are the ones who must come with the solutions. And those solutions are quite easy to find. If we want to help everyone and to reach the carbon neutrality by 2050, we have first to reduce dramatically energy consumption and move towards renewable energy. But this will cost a lot of money, of course. We know it will cost a lot of money. But this is the only option which is sustainable, fair, and that will guarantee energy independence of the European Union, which is absolutely necessary. The question is, of course, who's going to pay? Because that's going to cost a lot of money, a lot of money. Many people simply cannot afford it. They cannot isolate their house. They cannot change their car. They cannot decide to move and use the train on an everyday basis if we, the public powers, do not help them. So yes, we need a long-term investment plan. The resilience facility was a first and very interesting first step. But we now need a permanent mechanism to invest, to isolate houses everywhere in Europe, to invest in public transportation. If we want to reconcile the citizens with the European Union, if we want the citizens to think that the European Union is the solution, we have to demonstrate that we are with them and that we help them on an everyday basis. And the only question that remains is, who's going to pay? But who's going to pay? The answer is very simple. Those who profit from the crisis. In a crisis, there are always those who suffer and those who profit from the crisis. And when you look at the benefits of the multinationals today, not just energy, but all multinationals in the agri-food, in the finance sector and so on, when you look at the wealth of the richest people in Europe, this is growing very fast. So the answer is very simple. Let's tax the rich and help the other ones. Let's tax the few and help the many.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you, Irache. Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, Pamela, for the very rich debate. And I think our panelists have made one thing very clear. The green transition must be a just transition. And it is our family, the Social Democrats, that will make the difference for ordinary people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we continue. So.
Just waiting for our next guest to arrive. And we've heard today and yesterday from a lot of current leaders. And I also think it's time that we hear the voice of the next generation. And we gathered with us 3 young PES activists. And they are part of the association PES Activists, the grassroots of the Party of European Socialists. We know them very well from the election campaign from 2019. And, of course, we have to rally the troops for them again to be our strong grassroots campaign holders across Europe to help us with the next campaign. And I keep on looking for them. I'm very sorry. Okay, there they are. Great to... I introduce you on stage. Nathalie from Belgium. Alexandra from Poland. And Rocio from Spain. Welcome. The next generation people. Very good to have you here. We're proud of you. You helped us a lot in the last campaign, and I hope that in the next campaign you will be active for us too. But first, to explain a little bit to the audience, Nathalie, you are activist, but what is your role actually in the Social Democratic family?
Thank you, Sarah, for your question. But before I'm going to answer that question, I would actually like to start by asking the public for a big applause for all the activists and all the militants who have been working their asses off for the past years. And we will need them in the next election and the campaigns as well.
And you pointed it out to me, they're from all age groups. It's just that we have the young generation at stage now, but they are from all age groups.
Exactly. And it's important to appreciate these activists because a movement, especially a movement like ours, where democracy is a big keystone, it is important that we do not only have strong leaders, and we do have strong leaders. I mean, if you look at the names that have been on this stage this weekend, it's simply impressive. But a movement also needs strong activists. Because without grassroots movements, we are left with only people at the top talking about politics. And I can tell you a little secret, it's probably not really a secret, but people are tired of this kind of politics. People want to participate. People do not want politicians talking behind closed doors anymore. People do not want only politicians practicing politics. And I think in order to win the next elections, we need to start communicating honestly and openly about our wins, but also we have to be honest about our losses. We cannot take everything. We have to make compromise, and we have to be honest about that as well. And as you all know, trust in politics, unfortunately has been declining. So I think it's really important that we, more than ever, need to tell the truth. We have to tell the people also the benefits of the policy that we are making. Especially as social democrats, we make policy that is good for the people. And we have to tell them. Me, myself, I'm Belgian. I live in Brussels. It's the heart of the EU. I see the European buildings every day, but still a lot of people do not know the benefits of the EU. They do not know what the EU does for them. And I think a strong activist, whether they are young, as we are, or the more experienced ones, I think it's our role, and we are a great asset because we are locally embedded. We are part of youth organizations everywhere in Europe to also defend those values, to show the benefits of our policies. And I think that's why we are very important in that regard. So I think we can strengthen each other. We need the leaders, but also the leaders need
you. And I can tell you from experience from the campaign that you helped us spread the message, but you also took the message from society to us.
Exactly.
So that was a very nice cooperation. Yes, thank you, Nathalie. So Alexandra, you're from Poland. And how do you see the EU cooperating in terms of geographical balance from a young activist's perspective?
Thank you for your question, first of all. So, as a young activist and as a young socialist, I see our struggle to be international. And I think that in our struggle, there's no space for exclusion. In my vision of Europe, this continent is not a fortress. In my vision of Europe, no human is illegal. In my vision of Europe, there's no one dying on the Polish-Belarusian border. And in my vision of Europe, no human is being pushed away.
Thank you.
Call me young, call me idealistic, call me strongly opinionated. I am all of those things. My vision of Europe is simple. In this vision of Europe, we say yes to enlargement. We say yes to the enlargement of our minds, of our hearts, and of our borders. Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, the countries of the Western Balkans. I think it's high time that the European Union welcomes them and reaches out their hand. So this is my vision of European cooperation. European cooperation is also about women, freedom, and life. So, Jian Azadi.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Strong words there. Lucio, welcome on stage too. So we spoke a bit about the past campaigns. We spoke about enlargement process, women's rights, human rights. But at one point we're also entering the stage of the next European elections. And how do you see the future of the PES activists in the next phase?
Thank you very much. I feel very honored to be here, and also it's a great honor, but also a great responsibility to be here representing the PES activists to convey the message of this movement to you, to the PES. And first thing I want to say is that we are here, we are ready. Next elections will come very soon, and we are here to work very hard to ensure that Socialists and Democrats will be the first force in the next European elections in 2024.
Yes, that's the spirit.
Yes, it's very special what the work we have to do as the grassroots of the party, and at the same time we want to be the force of the party in the streets, and we also want to be the eyes and the ears of the party in order to have the opportunity to pass the party, the messages of the people, of the streets, of the neighbors, of the towns, to be able to do together a really good results for the elections. And to make this a reality, we have to also to work as a PES activist to develop probably an internal structure that allows us to create this bi-directional relationship through transparent and democratic procedures, and to allow to have this opportunity to build together, because we believe activists are at the heart of the parties. We and you, we also are. We all are the future and the eyes, and in this way, we will have to work to make these good desires a reality for future. Thank you.
Thank you. So, a big applause for. They wanted to be called activists, but I will call them the next leaders, the next generation of leaders in Europe. And then now it's time for the next panel, and I call back on stage Caroline and Jonnek, please.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Discussion today. I'd like to call on stage Mr. Lars Klingbeil, the co-leader of SPD Germany and our host today. Thank you, Lars. Josep Borrell, the Secretary of the PD, Enrico Letta, the Vice President and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, Tanja Fajon, and the Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson. Please take the stage.
Welcome on the stage. Welcome. We are facing challenging times. And the challenge that represents... Yes, I was a bit too fast with my intro, and a video is better than a long speech. So thanks again to all the speakers for being with us this morning about this debate, a new European momentum. And we are now in a European momentum with certainly challenges, risks, but also opportunities and answers that we have to give as a social democratic family. We want a Europe that works for all citizens. That's what we are aiming for. And we have seen the Conference of Europe that triggered the debate about the future of our union. But we know also that it was not a real European-wide debate, this convention, while now, with the war, with the energy crisis, with the inflation, the transition, citizens really feel the need to have a Europe that is well prepared to face the challenge. And our progressive families has continuous effort and action to improve the life of millions of citizens to live in Europe, all Europeans living in Europe. And we continue to promote a vision of solidarity, of sustainability, well-being, feminism, and protect and empower our citizens. And we are halfway in the run-up of the next European election, so it's really timely to have this debate now about our vision and this momentum, the new European momentum.
And first of all, we'd like to come to Lars Klingbeil. We discussed it already in a lot of panels. We are witnessing an increasing influence of transnational right-wing and populist movements in the EU. They divide societies and damage the quality of our democratic life. Last year, Lars, SPD booked an electoral success against a hard-right alternative for Germany. And in your opinion, how can we learn from the German example?
One word, respect. I mean, this was the main course in our election campaign, respect. And the long answer is, for example, it was about 12 euro minimum wage. To be honest, when we started with the election campaign and I told all the journalists here in Berlin in the political bubble, this is one of our main topics, a lot of journalists said, oh, such a boring topic to talk about 12 euro minimum wage. And even if it's not fantastic in the Berlin political bubble, you see it infects the life of 7 million people living here in Germany if they get 12 euro for an hour. And I mean, to talk about respect means also to see the all-day life problems of people. And sometimes the progressive movements wants the people to be other than they are. So we should not talk to a nurse that she has to become a doctor. We should improve her work as a nurse and look that she has better conditions in her work and is better paid. We should not talk to a policeman that he should become an advocate or something like that. We should work hard that he is better paid as a policeman. And this is when we talk about respect in the election campaign. And so many people voted for us because they said, this is the political force that sees our problems. And to add one thing, when you ask about the international rights movement, and I want to say that here because I went to Brazil a few weeks ago and met Lula, and I think we all hope here that he will win the second round in the election against this guy Bolsonaro. But when I went to Lula, he told me that the AFD, so the right-wing populists from Germany, that they already have been there in Brazil, and that Steve Bannon has been there. And other right-wing populists from Europe have been in Brazil. And then I went to Chile and met the new government, and they also told me that the AFD and Steve Bannon and other right-wing populists have been there. So we should not do the mistake and think that the others are focused on national politics also. They are very good in connecting, and they are all linked to Vladimir Putin. And this is a homework for us. We have to become stronger on the European and on the global level. We have to connect us. We have to help us in the social democratic and socialist family. We have to become a much more stronger global movement. This is our homework we have to do, and then we have to talk about respect and fight the right-wing populists.
Thank you very much, Lars, and I'm turning now to Mr. Borrell, Josep, High Representative, Vice President of the European Commission. We have seen a solid unity, European unity to face this unprecedented Russian aggression against Ukraine, and we have seen the response that the EU has been doing. So now, how can we as EU ensure a long-lasting support to Ukraine?
Yeah,
Works?
yes, it's working.
Well, certainly our support has been determined. Ukrainians, I remember in January, I traveled to Donbass, to the front line, and I met the Ukrainian Prime Minister. And he told me, and the war drums were already sounding, he told me, we know that when the Russians will attack, you will not come to support us with your soldiers. We know. But at least we expect that you will provide us with the arms to defend us. And that's what we have been doing in an unprecedented manner. And we have to continue doing that as much as needed, as for long as needed. One thing I'm sure that we have to repeat once and again. This war cannot finish because we get tired of supporting Ukraine. This cannot be the reason. This cannot be the reason. And we have to explain to our public opinions that our support to Ukraine is not a matter of generosity. It's in our own interest. It's in our security. Just imagine in which situation we would be today if Putin had succeeded on conquering Ukraine. Where would we? So it's an important political pedagogy. We have to explain to our people that we have to continue supporting Ukraine militarily, economically, diplomatically, because it is in our own interest.
Thank you, Josep. We'd like to go to Enrico Letta, taking into consideration the perspective of an enlarged and more united, stronger EU. How should the EU improve its functioning and decision-making?
I have a very short answer on that. There's one key point, and the most important point about the way in which the European Union can work today and in an enlarged scenario is to eliminate once forever the veto right and the unanimity vote at the European level. I think it is the only way in which we can work together. The veto right is never for a general interest. Veto right is always to blackmail the others, is always to take advantage using the veto right and to take some personal or very short and very short-term interest. So I think it is so clear. And I think we have to really underline the fantastic work that Josep Borrell, in his double capacity, did to keep together all the European leaders, all the European countries, even in a context where the veto right is working, that is the one on foreign and security policy. So Josep was great in creating this unity. And it is a demonstration that Europe can be united. But you know very well, we know very well, that to be able to work the elimination of the veto right on other main issues, on the most important issues of our life is decisive. And I say that because we know very well that in Europe there are countries, there are parties, there are political parties raising the flag and saying that I'm going there just to keep what I want. But Europe will never be a Europe à la carte. Europe à la carte means the death of Europe, and we have to stand on this value. So I don't want to say broader reflections on that, because otherwise the dilution of the most important point will be there. So my point is no more veto right. We have to take all our decisions at the majority. Is also the way to responsibilize leadership, national leaderships, because we need to create alliances, we need to stay with the rest of and create alliances among countries. I think is the crucial time to do so, and I think citizens are also understanding how it's important. So keep fighting on that. I think is one of the battles for our family, and I'm sure that with one battle like this one, or like the ones that Lars just mentioned, because it is not just a topic of formal ways to vote. Is also the way to get these results, the results that Lars mentioned. I think we can get the most important mission. And in this Congress in Berlin, we have to have in mind the mission. Our mission is to win the European elections in 24, to be the first party at European elections at the European level. It is possible because of the crisis of the EPP, and it is possible because of the fact that our ideas, our values are today the strongest values at European level. So keep fighting for this mission.
Thank you.
Thank you, Enrico. And I'm turning to Tanja Fajon, the leader of SD Slovenia, and congratulations again for entering the government and now for being Deputy Prime Minister. Tanja, you have been for years a prominent advocate of Schengen area. So my question to you, how do you envision a future of the Schengen area, and how should it be better prepared, more resilient to face future challenges?
Thank you very much. It's true that Schengen has a lot of challenges, and I'm glad that you opened this topic. I had many opportunities to discuss with Ilva, and I admire your courage because I think you have an amazingly difficult job. We have a big discussion in Slovenia currently about the enlargement of Schengen, because as you know, it's Croatia, our direct neighboring country. We have Bulgaria and Romania for several years waiting to join Schengen. And I sincerely hope that those three countries will join as soon as possible, because Schengen, just to mention, it's something most tangible our citizens can feel. It's the fundament of our integration. But Schengen today is not working. It's not the Schengen we used to know it, and we need to restore it, because I think that if we don't do that, and if we fail to reintroduce proper measures in Schengen, every next enlargement will be a failure. And we are at the critical point. We have 6 countries in Schengen, and we discussed that several times, that are several years against the legal background, breaking the Schengen rules, with introducing interior border controls. And we have not, and we shall not turn our blind eyes against that. I mean, in Slovenia, we have Austria next to us. They're having interior border controls for years. For what reason? Are there any arguments about really illegal crossing or high numbers that we faced in 2015? When we had COVID pandemic, there was a lot of selfishness on our interior border controls. I mean, a lot of countries really reacted with closing down the borders. The same goes when it's migration situation, where we have challenges. But if we lose Schengen, and if we don't manage to restore it the way we created it, I think it's the beginning of the end of European integration. And that is what I feel is at stake. So please, colleagues, we have to really, and Ilva, I know there is a lack of confidence between our countries. And we all try to have some sort of sovereignty on our borders. But people feel Europe through freedom of travel. And this we have to protect. So I do hope we manage, and at the same time, I do hope we manage to enlarge Schengen the way we promised, because in the EU, for the last few years, we delivered a lot of promises, especially when we discuss about enlargement. Name it Schengen, name it visa liberalization, or the Western Balkans. And we failed to deliver these promises. So we have to, as progressives, be more credible and front runners to deliver what we are promising. And that is when our citizens will really trust us.
Thank you, Tanja. And you already mentioned it, we go to Ilva. And thanks to your political leadership, we were able to activate for the first time the Temporary Protection Directive. And it was successful. And the question is whether this overall positive experience can serve as an example to manage migration at the EU level in a more solidaristic way.
Thank you. Yes, it can, I must say. And when I woke up this morning, the Thursday, 24th of February, And we realized that the attack on Ukraine was much bigger than anybody had really expected. And I immediately realized we're going to have a huge flow of refugees coming into the European Union. And I remembered in 2015 when I was responsible in Sweden on the previous big refugee crisis that we had. And I remember how absent Europe was. This was really, in my view, a failure. That we didn't manage that refugee crisis, that Europe didn't activate the temporary protection. And also remember what happened afterwards. We were divided. We were left in a situation where migration was more or less a toxic situation, very difficult to deal with. And I said to myself, now you are responsible, but it will never happen again. Now we have to do it differently. And I think we could do it differently because we have really invested in trying to treat. My aim is to treat migration as any normal, boring EU policy area. You know, it's normal that we do not agree. It's normal that we put proposal on the table that nobody's really happy about, but step by step we make progress, you know, and I think this is the right approach. So what we did was that we had an extraordinary meeting on the council on Sunday, and then I immediately went to all the borders to meet with people, to show directly that we are there to support, to show solidarity with those countries most affected. And 1 week after the war started, we managed to activate unanimously the temporary protection. And I think this is really something, the temporary protection is for a specific situation. So that they are luckily not so common. But I think the whole idea of that we better manage migration together. And this is what we see now, especially in the Council, I must say, that there's a more of a constructive approach on step-by-step taking their decisions, well, to make compromises, and that all member states actually understand that compromises are necessary here, because we can only manage migration together, and we can only manage migration together also with third country. And migration is normal. Migration will never stop. Migration has always been there, will always be there, and our aim is to manage migration in an orderly way, and we show that we can do that.
Thank you, Ylva. Thank you for your strong leadership on the matter, and I'm turning to Lars. And the second question, and the war in Ukraine had a severe geostrategic implication for the EU. So the question is, what are the main priorities, according to you, for a robust EU foreign policy and security policy?
Okay, good question, important question. And let me start that we need to strengthen the European Union in this area of security and foreign policy. And this has to be absolutely clear. That means budget, that means cooperation, and that also means mindset. Then, second point is we need strategic cooperations. We have to become a global player. If I talk to people in Africa or in Latin America, I hear that the Chinese and that the Russians were there and have these cooperations. And I think we have to become stronger and better than them and have to find our ways of cooperation, maybe in energy policy, in other fields of political cooperation. And the third point, Jonek, is that we have to enlarge the European Union. I mean, we have clear criteria with the Copenhagen criteria, and they have to be fulfilled. But I think it's important that the European Union starts again to think more geopolitical. It's important that we have this process with the Balkans. And it's a good signal that Olaf Scholz and others went to Kiev and gave this clear signal to the Ukrainians: we want you in the European Union because you are fighting for our values in this war Putin started. And if we bring all this together, I think this mindset of the European Union to say we want to become a more political actor in the area of security and foreign policy will be fulfilled. But it's important that we do it, and the European momentum is now, and we have to do it now.
I'd like to turn again to Josep Borrell. We have been discussing the Russian aggression all weekend, basically, and it is impacting the world. We see the triple crisis on finances, energy, and the danger of a new global food crisis. And the pinpoint question is, what can the EU really do about it?
We don't have a magic wand. Certainly, the problem of food prices and scarcity and energy is hitting hard the rest of the world, especially in Africa. What we can do? Well, what we have done. We have supported Ukraine on exporting their grain. 2/3 of the exports of grain and sunflowers from Ukraine has gone through our solidarity lanes. Secondly, we increase our production and export of food. We are a big producer and big exporter of food. We export more. Third, we provide financial assistance. We have allocated 7,000 million euros to fight against the famine. Let's call things by their name, famine. So more financial support, more export of food, more capacity of exporting grain from where the grain is. But the big problem has been created first by climate change. Prices of food started growing before the war because of the drought. The drought was already there before the war, and the prices increased in 21 much before the war started. And now the prices are decreasing even if the war continues, because it was also a speculative bubble that made prices in August skyrocketing. Now they are decreasing, and they are at the same level that before the war. But this toxic combination of the effects of climate change and the Russian cutting the exports of grain from Ukraine has produced in some parts of the world, especially in the Corn of Africa, literally famine. And at that moment, right now, there are 100 ships waiting in the Black Sea to go through the phosphorus. They are there, queuing, one after the other, loading 2 million tons of wheat, and they are waiting for the control to be done. So we should raise our voice together with the Secretary General of the United Nations to ask for this checking to be done quickly, because otherwise it will come too late for many people who will die of hunger. Literally, that's the problem. 20 million tons of wheat blocked in Ukraine by the Russians means thousands of people dying. And we have to fight the story that the Russians are widespread around the world. This is the consequences of the European sanctions. Enormous lie, has nothing to do with our sanctions. It's because you block the exports of food from Ukraine. It's because you created a strong disturbances on the circuits of the world economy with the war. But we have to convince people around the world which are the causes of the problem, because people suffer the consequences. And when you suffer the consequences, you say, okay, whatever the causes are, I cannot bear that, so we stop the war. Stop the war because I cannot continue supporting it. And this is a big, once again, political work to be done by all of us, the governments, the institutions, the people, to fight the Russian narrative that the consequences of our sanctions is creating famine around the world. It's the consequences of the war that Mr. Putin launched against Ukraine.
Thank you, Josep.
Thank you, Josep. And I'm turning to Enrico. Enrico, you just came out of a very tough national election where you have to fight hard, very hard, against far-right parties. So my question to you is, what lessons should we learn to prevent these parties from gaining ground in Europe now?
I would like to give you one interesting figure. In Italy, we have, in the electoral law, we have the possibility for 4 million of Italians abroad to vote for deputies elected from the Italians from abroad. And on these 4 million of voters, we took, our party, with Roberto, we took the absolute majority. The absolute majority. People abroad, Italians abroad, voted in absolute majority. They gave the absolute majority of these deputies to us. And we lost elections at home. My lesson on that is that we are very good with people globalized. We are less good with people on the ground. And this is one key point. The fact that on many issues that are related to the poorest conditions of life, to the big problems with the present energy crisis. You mentioned this point, and I think it was very good what Stefan, you said at the very beginning of this matinee this morning. It is absolutely essential that the European Union can give an immediate answer to that, because it's a demonstration that if we are able to tackle these problems, we are able to tackle the problems for people who risk to be left behind. And this is exactly what we have to do as progressives, as socialists and democrats. And my conclusion on that, because time is quite over, is the fact that, you know, in my experience with populists and with the far right, there's a very simple compass. And the compass is that we win when Europe is going well. We lose when Europe is going bad. There's an immediate link between the way in which Europe is able to deliver and the way in which Europe is not. The example is what happened in 20 and 21st. We won all the elections in Italy, all the elections. It was the period in which Europe was delivering. It was delivering because of Next Generation EU, because of the pandemic, vaccines, fantastic. And I think what you did, I see Olaf. Olaf was one of the architects of the Next Generation EU idea. And I think it was fantastic. It was good, successful. What Antonio did on the social pillar, Europe delivering. I think this is the key issue. On climate change, I see France here. When Europe delivers, we win. When Europe does not deliver, we are in dire straits, and populist and far right are winning. So my conclusion is very simple. We have to push Europe in being better. Further integration, better delivery, and able to answer concrete questions by the people on the street. Europe has to answer these kind of questions, not only talking with national governments or with a national establishment. And I think Next Generation EU was exactly the good example. It was a success. We have to take into account the success, and we have to keep fighting on that.
Thank you, Enrico. And now back to Tanya. Congratulations again for entering in government and sending away the populist government. We already said it, the SPD managed to keep the far right small, but also in Slovenia you succeeded. And what can we learn from the Slovenian example?
Yes, thank you. I prefer to speak or think about what we have or have to do better. And this is what I really strongly believe, Lars, you said at the beginning, respect. That respect won in Germany, in your campaign. It was something similar in Slovenia. We tried to do and give people back their voice. We tried to show them that we have a respect and that we want to give them dignity. I'm coming from Ljubljana, and you said well that we changed the populist government. Our democracy in Slovenia was seriously endangered. We had a strong political interference in the freedom of media, in the democracy, in the rule of law. And I'm coming from Ljubljana. I never imagined that in my hometown, that during the peaceful manifestation, people were angry against the government. That during this peaceful manifestation, we had water cannons and tear gas scaring people away. You've never imagined these dark images of the city. So we really tried to bring the voice back of people, And we now, as a new government, are opening back the doors to civil society, to NGOs. We are fighting for freedom of media. We still have a big difficulties with interference in the public broadcast, in the National Press Agency. All that was happening in my country in a very short period. We were following very bad populist, nationalist narratives that are winning what is happening today in Sweden or in Italy. So what I try to do, also as a deputy prime minister with our progressive party, is that we really want to be back part of the core of Europe, defending our fundamental values of solidarity, equality, democracy, and especially understand what people expect from us, engage them and give them their voice, and bring back the credibility that our policy is really losing. This is what we really have to work very hard.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you very much. And I'm turning to Ilva, Commissioner. On your portfolio, you have also the fight against crime, the security issue within the European Union. So how do you think that the EU is doing when it comes to fight against criminality in its different form in Europe?
We are not doing well enough. We are stepping up, and we need to do much more in strengthening police cooperation, using new technology in the fight against crime. But can I also say that I think that we as a political family can do better on the fight against crime. Crime has a clear class perspective. Only very, very rich people can care about their own security. All normal citizens, they live in areas where drugs are being dealt. They go on public transport where there are risks of robbery. They have to work in shops as drivers and in many other jobs where there is a risk of being victim of criminality. And in my view, having a safe society is the glue in society. If you feel that you are not protected by police, by society, or if you feel that some groups are better protected than others, for example, because of the color of the skin or their origin, this is really a poison to society. So we need to take back the fight against criminality to do it in a social democratic way. And there is also a clear gender perspective here. Just to give you one example, when the war in Ukraine broke out, I immediately understood that there could be a huge risk of trafficking of women and children. Is that because I'm a woman myself? Maybe. And then immediately we started, and after 1 week, Europol has started a special task force for fighting against trafficking. Is it because the executive director of Europol is a woman? Maybe. And we have activated the whole network of all anti-trafficking coordinators that we have in the European Union. Is it because the anti-trafficking coordinator is a woman? Maybe. But I think trafficking of human beings is just one example. We have a lot of problems with trafficking of drugs, trafficking of weapons. These you can only sell once. If you traffic women and children, you can sell this young woman, her body, again, and again, and again, and again, and again. And this is a crime with a lot of impunity. So we, as social democrats, we have to take the fight against criminality.
Thank you so much, Ilva. And with this very strong plea, I'd like to thank all the panelists, Enrico Letta, Ilva Johansson, Josep Borrell, Tanja Fajon, and Lars Klingbeil. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Caroline and Jonnek. Thank you very much. So, to introduce the next speaker of our Congress, who is so special to all of us in our family, I'm going to need a little bit of help. So I would like to ask back on stage our Secretary General, Achim Post.
Long time no see, huh?
Long time no see. Hello, Achim.
Hi.
So about this next special speaker,
Yeah.
how long have you known him?
Between you and me, or
Yeah.
for the whole conference?
Why not? We're amongst friends. so,
Yeah. You always say that we are amongst friends.
Yes.
So I know him since 1977, when I, as a young socialist coming from a small village in North Rhine-Westphalia for the first time in my life to a big city. And that was a conference, of the young socialists. And I remember well that both of us had perhaps a little bit more longer hair than today. More like this here, like it was used in the 70s.
Maybe I've seen the curls, you mean, as well.
Yeah. I didn't have, no?
The special
Yeah,
guest?
could be.
Yeah, maybe. And so you've known him for a long time. You still work closely with him, have the privilege of working closely with him. So I can also ask you something about now.
You can.
Okay, so why is it that you think he makes such a great chancellor?
So being serious now, huh?
Yes.
And political. So first of all, conference, comrades, delegates, I'm happy that you are here, that you are so patient, and that you make this Berlin Congress such a big success. That's the first of all. And I promised before, Antonio, when we started in Lisbon with the Congress, then in Madrid with Pedro, and now in Berlin, that we will do finally a good job like you did in Lisbon and Pedro in Madrid. So we are not so bad, I would say. But coming to your question, it is good to have a chancellor who is strong and competent. I guess you agree. It is very good to have a chancellor who is winning elections, like he did 1 year ago. Yeah, you can applaud. But in historical times, I guess in the most critical situation since World War II, it is necessary, no, it is absolutely necessary to have a chancellor who you can trust on. You have a chancellor who is a real leader in these difficult times. And therefore, it's good to have here Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany.
Welcome again to this stage, Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of Germany and our host of these days.
And I use this second, if you
Yes,
allow.
no, of course.
Because you are the boss here, but
no.
give me just a second. So I'm seeing the two leaders of SPD, Saskia Esken and Lars Klingbeil. And really, we are grateful that you are the host. You are a wonderful host. Thanks you very much. And now I would say,
Yes.
Olaf, it's a
We're ready.
pleasure and an honor to have you here, the Chancellor of Germany.
Dear Sergei, dear Stefan, dear comrades and friends, I'm delighted that Social Democrats from all over Europe have been able to meet here in Berlin over the past couple of days. Berlin is located in the heart of Europe, and so it is the ideal meeting place for all those who have Europe in their hearts. And it is definitely the right place at the right moment. Just across the street, only a few steps away from here, you will see the East Side Gallery. Every single day, This remaining section of the Berlin Wall serves as a reminder of how the city of Berlin was divided and how the Europe was formally divided into East and West. This division is now a thing of the past. It was a division that the people of Europe refused to accept. And thanks to many brave citizens, this wall that divided the people was finally brought down. And the people joined together in solidarity and sealed the end of the East-West conflict. This solidarity can still be perceived today, and we, Social Democrats, are working hard to guarantee that this kind of solidarity continues to exist throughout Europe. Dear comrades, now we are again faced with the question where the new dividing line between a free Europe and a neo-imperial autocracy will run in the future. I called it a Zeitenwende when the Russian attack on and invasion of Ukraine began in February. Putin wants to draw a new border through our continent by force, something we never wanted to experience again in Europe. Consequently, the brutal invasion of Ukraine is an assault on the European security order. We resolutely oppose this, not only as individual states and in association with our transatlantic partners, but also as the European Union. Never again should there be war between its member states. This was the founding promise of the European Union. It is now up to us to preserve and develop this promise of peace. This is what most people, both in the former West and in the former East, expect from Europe. That is why we cannot accept Russia's assault on peace in Europe. We cannot simply watch women, men and children being killed, see free countries being whipped off the map and disappearing behind walls of iron curtains. We do not want to return to the 19th and 20th centuries with their wars of conquest and totalitarian excesses. Europe must assume responsibility for its own security and defense and strengthen European defense capabilities in order to support and strengthen NATO as the key pillar of our common security policy. Dear Magdalena, and dear Sanna, who is not with us at this moment, I'm delighted that we will soon strengthen our NATO alliance by welcoming Sweden and Finland as members. At the same time, however, we do not intend to react purely on a military level. We are confronting the autocrats and dictators of this world with strong European cohesion. This is reflected in the sanctions we have introduced. We are committed to our common values of peace, democracy, and freedom by conviction. This is how we defend our European values against attacks from the outside. This is also what distinguishes the life's work of Willy Brandt, who spoke to the people of Berlin in front of the Schöneberg Town Hall on the 10th of November 1989. In the wake of the emotional events of the previous days, he talked about a wind of change blowing across Europe and that Germany and Berlin could not avoid being part of these changes. Brandt spoke about our duties towards peace and towards Europe and emphasized that there could be no political solutions if we failed to respect these duties. Willy Brandt spoke of the need to continue the development of the European community and to overcome the fragmentation of our continent once and for all. Dear friends, this is exactly what our task in Europe is about, overcoming divisions and putting those pieces together again that belong together. To do this, we need a solid set of shared values combined with great courage and determination. European social democracy is sending this courage today from Berlin. Courage for Europe. Liebe Freundinnen und Freunde,
Dear friends,
liebe Freundinnen und Freunde,
dear friends,
ich bin deshalb sehr froh.
I'm therefore very glad that at the European Council in June, we unanimously said yes. Yes, Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova, prospectively also Georgia, and of course the countries of the Western Balkans belong with us, the free and democratic part of Europe.
Wir stehen bei unseren
We have given our word to the accession candidates to the countries of the Western Balkans, in fact, almost 20 years ago, and these words must now be followed by deeds.
Eddie just said that we are standing by the countries of the Western Balkans. Dafür steht die SPD.
That is what the PES stands for, and this is what I stand for. And this is good for us if we want to assert our values in a world of 8 billion, probably 10 billion people in the future. A European Union of 27, 30 or 36 states with more than 500 million free and equal citizens
Stärker zur Geltung bringen.
will be able to assert itself better in a global sense. An economy powered by renewable energies with leading research institutions, innovations and innovative companies with stable democracies, social services and a public infrastructure unparalleled in the world. An economy powered by renewable energies, electricity from the sun, wind and water, creating secure jobs for the future. All this is possible. The experience of the past months proves that blockades can be overcome. That is why a few weeks ago in Prague, I presented some ideas on the future of the Union in Prague. Firstly, I am personally committed to the enlargement of the European Union. That the EU continues to grow towards the east is a gain for all of us. Of course, the candidate countries need to fulfill the criteria for accession. We will support them in this as best we can. But we must also make the EU fit for this great enlargement. The EU will only be able to accept new members if it keeps up the momentum of European deepening and thus creates the basis for a much larger EU.
Im Ministerrat ist schnelles, pragmatisches Handeln gefragt.
Fast and pragmatic action is needed in the Council of Ministers. I have therefore proposed that in matters of the common policy, but also in other areas such as tax policy, we move incrementally towards majority voting. This will bring us a great deal closer to a more solidary and closely interlinked European Union. I know that we still have a lot of convincing to do here, but I would also like to make it clear that if a geopolitical Europe is our aspiration, then majority decisions are a gain and not a loss of sovereignty.
Dabei dürfen wir die
At the same time, we must not lose sight of the concerns of the smaller member states in particular. In future, too, every country and its concerns must be heard. Anything else would be a betrayal of the European idea. I see us Social Democrats as having a duty here. Let us look together for solutions as to how such a Europe can make decisions in the future. Let us move forward together for a sovereign and strong, for a democratic and free Europe.
Es kommt auf uns.
It is down to all of us, because what matters is our European sovereignty. This is my second concern. In essence, European sovereign means that we become more independent in all areas, that we assume more responsibility for our own security, that we cooperate even more closely and stand together to assert our values and interests. Especially this week, more than a dozen EU member states picked up an initiative by us in order to organize a common European air defense, the European Sky Shield. That sovereignty towards the outside needs it on the inside as well. It means to stand in solidarity, to work together on becoming independent of energy and fuel deliveries from a few autocratic countries. Europe owes its prosperity to trade. That is why we need further sustainable free trade agreements and an ambitious trade agenda. Our industries need to be in a position to be a pioneer in key technologies, in digitization or in mobility. We have to be global leaders in the expansion and use of renewable energies. That strengthens our independence, it creates secure jobs, it supports our industry and makes us attractive for our partners around the world. We want to show that climate change and a good economy can go hand in hand by introducing developing technologies here that are used globally. If we succeed in this, then this big industrial change will lead to secure and good jobs throughout Europe in the 10, 20 or 30 years to come. That doesn't happen by itself. We have to make it happen. Dear friends, I would like to pick up another point, because the subject of sovereignty and with a view of the war in the east of our continent, it is a very important one. We need a better cooperation of our defense efforts in Europe. In future, we will need a coordinated organization of capacities and fast, rapid deployment force and headquarter in Europe for this. We need to push forward with our defense efforts as well in a joined-up way within Europe. That strengthens the sovereignty and the security of Europe. And the third big mandate I see for Europe also follows from this turning point, and it goes far beyond it. We have to close ranks, overcome old conflicts, and find new solutions. This sounds like it goes without saying, but there's a lot of work involved to achieve it. That is especially true for two areas that probably caused the greatest tensions between the member states in recent years: migration and financial policy. But the recent past has shown that we can make joint progress here. After the attack by Russia on Ukraine, the EU has proved its ability to act and offered protection to Ukrainian citizens. Europe is an attractive continent. Many people want to come and live here with us, be it to find protection from war, persecution, or on the search for work and a better life. Us Europeans are required to work on migration with foresight. That means also to prevent illegal immigration and to facilitate the migration of qualified and much-needed workers from outside the EU. In the fiscal policy, we managed to take a historic step during the COVID pandemic. We gave a solidary European response and supported investments with means from the EU. And this reconstruction program is helping us now in the current crisis as well. Dear friends, in the founding decades of the unified German, it was all about closer economic ties. But the actual objective was to resolve conflicts that had been in existence for hundreds of years on the continent. It was about peace on the continent, which was plunged into ruin too many times, not least by the 2 world wars triggered by Germany. In the meantime, however, the peace project has also become a Europe-wide project of freedom and justice. This, in turn, we owe above all to the countries that joined our community only later on, the Spaniards, Greeks, and the Portuguese, who, after decades of dictatorship, turned to a Europe of freedom and democracy. And we owe it to the citizens of Central and Eastern Europe who overcame the Cold War with their struggle for freedom, human rights, and justice. Freedom and democracy are our acquired heritage, our joint heritage, especially now in view of the renewed threat to freedom and democracy that we are experiencing in the east of our continent. We feel this connection particularly strongly. And this is the 4th thought I would like to share with you. When there is talk of liberal democracy in the heart of Europe, it must worry us greatly. That is why we cannot accept it when principles of the rule of law are violated and democratic control is dismantled. That is why Social Democrats support the Commission in its commitment to the rule of law, Dear friends, Putin's war is challenging social security and social cohesion everywhere in Europe, for he is using energy as a weapon against a free Europe. We need to keep our societies together in this crisis. I have summed this up in one sentence: you'll never walk alone.
Das heißt, wir stehen zusammen in Solidarität.
That means we stand together in solidarity and unity, and we can't be shaken. Especially now, social cohesion must be strengthened, a core issue of social democracy. As a joint answer to the challenges of inflation and increasing energy prices, we need, as our resolution that we decided on yesterday, we need to have a European pact on solidarity and on affordable energy. That is an important building block for this is what we have jointly achieved in the EU, that windfall profits are skimmed off in the crisis and that we thereby directly relieve citizens and companies.
Dear friends, times of change and challenges are also times for unity and decisive action. We are the largest political family and the one with the longest tradition. Together, we have the best chances of shaping and improving Europe. That is why we strive to become the most powerful force in the European Parliament in 2024. There's one person who played a big part in this success story, a true European and an experienced political leader. Thank you, Sergej, for your outstanding job over the past 11 years. And now, with Stefan at the helm of the PES, European social democracy has been further reinforced by a strong leadership figure. Thank you for your willingness to lead us. Our movement will enhance its claim to participation in the shaping of a just, sustainable and social Europe in the years to come. Stefan has not only rendered outstanding service as the Prime Minister of Sweden and Chairman of the Swedish Social Democratic Workers' Party, he has also been the driving force behind a lot of European achievements. The Social Summit he initiated in Gothenburg in 2017 gave the European Pillar of Social Rights the decisive impetus, paving the way for a fairer European Union for everyone. By stacking the social summit in Porto, Antonio Costa consistently continued along this path in the course of last year's Council presidency. Let me conclude by mentioning a central task that is crucial for Europe's future. We must forge ahead in achieving equality between women and men. Gender equality has been hit hard, not just by the COVID pandemic. The Russian invasion of Ukraine brought millions of refugees, mostly women and children, to the EU and other countries. The gender component of wars and conflict is clear. Gender-based violence, risk of trafficking, and many other factors of armed conflicts disproportionately affect women. In response to this, we must take fast and determined action. Gender equality is and will remain a core value of PES, thanks particularly to the active role of PES women. It is you who have put these topics high up on our agenda, and I hope you will carry on. Women and women's rights need to be a part of the solution developed to counteract global challenges. I vouch to you that our political family will have the drive to securing and advancing gender equality in every possible way. Dear friends, we are the people, was the appeal of the protesters in 1989. It was the appeal of the citizens which made Politburo autocrats understand that the people were no longer prepared to tolerate the suppression of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. It was the appeal that brought down the wall peacefully. Today, as Russia seeks to forcibly redraw the borders between freedom and autocracy, we are the people of Europe, must now resound throughout Europe, from the Mediterranean to the North Sea, from Lisbon to Tbilisi and beyond. Together we shall lay the foundation for a Europe of freedom, security and democracy. This is how we can protect and defend Europe's values, both internally and externally. Europe is our future, and we shall shape this future with courage. Thank you.
On September 13, 1 month ago, a young woman was walking in the streets of the capital of her country. She was 22 years old. And apparently, for a reason that I believe nobody in this room can find explicable, a group of men decided to arrest her on the basis of a piece of clothing that was not appropriately adjusted on a part of her body, her head. I'm talking about Mahsa Amini, a Kurdish woman who was in the streets of Tehran, arrested by a group of men that claim to be the morality police of the regime of Iran. Now, if Chancellor Scholz speaks about freedom and democracy as our heritage, well, this freedom and this democracy that we stand for doesn't stop at the border of the European Union. We are a truly internationalist movement, and what happens in Iran cannot be tolerated. And therefore, we stand in full solidarity with the brave women and men of Iran who are protesting in the streets of Iran against the Iranian regime.
Your voices, we sing together. Oh, bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Our hearts are not far, one from another. We are awake in moonlight night. We're all together, all alone.
Dear comrades, Teresa Bothe. Teresa is a true internationalist because also of her international background. She is German, Mexican, Irish roots, and she lives in Sicily. So you may understand I have a specific interest in that. Teresa, you have spent all your life and artistic career as an active voice for defending children and women, to be active to promote our values, your values, the values of our community and our movement. And recently, or a few years ago, you had already composed the song for the Iranian women movement. I would like you to tell us just shortly about your motivation to support the Iranian women.
I think there are some things we just need to know about. There are some things we need to hear. And I believe music can carry this message of important values, as you say. In Iran, as in Afghanistan, women have been suffering very, very much, as in other parts of the world as well. I believe music has the power to share a feeling, as we just shared together, and can also share ideas. But it can also be used to educate, to learn things, to write music about history or about values. When I write a song, or when I perform and sing a song, for me, it's a way to say that I care.
Thank you. Teresa Bothe. Where is my partner in crime? Saar van Buren. I think we are at the closing moments of our very important and beautiful Congress that took place in Berlin, and it is the moment maybe to call on stage again,
for the last time, to close these 2 wonderful days, after this a bit emotional moment, I must say, our new president of the Party of European Socialists and Democrats, Stefan Löfven.
Thank you so much. Well, we could have closed after this beautiful song, but I do want to say a few words, comrades and friends. It is an honor to conclude this Congress in my new capacity, and once again, thank you so much for your trust. I am so proud to become president of PES, but first again, I would like to thank you, Sergei, for all that you did, and I will do my utmost to at least try to continue building a strong, progressive Party of European Socialists. Today, through our panels and great interventions of our friends here, we have all got a good reminder of what our political family, PES, stands for. We heard about gender equality, democracy, and the well-being of our citizens. We heard about the defense of workers' rights, building a sustainable future with the Green Deal, and our role for peace and freedom on the international stage. All this is our common vision for the European project. We have important targets to meet in the coming year. We heard in many panels, and we are, of course, all aware of the crisis that we are facing, the war on Ukraine, the energy crisis, the fight against climate change will not disappear. We will have to defend also our citizens and our values. So our political family stands on the foundation of a great history, and we are here today to ensure that we'll also have a great future. Working together, confronting our ideas, being ambitious with our proposals, we will define the political debate in Europe and win the next European elections. This is now the way forward to shape the European Union that we wish for. So we must prepare for it also. It doesn't just happen. Prepare and hard work is what we have in front of us. So my first direct will be to start organizing and planning, prioritize the political agenda based from the resolution, formulating the key messages, develop methods for reaching out to as many citizens as we can. So we will now depart from this Congress, but we will continue a common journey towards the European election 2024. And it has been said before, we can say it again, with the objective to become the largest political party in the European Parliament. I'm looking forward to work with all our members, but I'm also looking forward to work with the PES staff. I want to thank you all, the staff, for all the work you have done for organizing this successful Congress. But thanks, yes. Thanks again also to SPD for hosting this, and thank all the volunteers from SPD that have done a great job. So lastly, to conclude, dear friends, as Party of European Socialists, we have the principles, we have the ideas, we have the movement. Together we will deliver a better, more fair, more sustainable future to all Europeans. This is our collective challenge, but it's also our promise. Thank you and farewell.
We close it? Yeah. Just to communicate officially that this Congress is officially closed. And you're happy to come on stage to take pictures, all together. Please. Franz. Dov'è Enrico?
Franz missing.
Franz. Borrell. Yes.
Yeah, well, everybody.
Please. Everybody. Photo.
Franz doesn't.
Pepe, Franz. I don't see Enrico. Improvisation.
Una mattina mi sto svegliato. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Una mattina mi sto svegliato e ho trovato l'invaso. Oh partigiano.